Chapter 81. Under the starry night sky. The alluring young lady floated up on the sparkling surface of the sea like a fairy from the 9 heavens. She tapped the surface of the sea with the tip of her foot and walked on the waves, hurrying toward the figure sitting cross-legged on the shoreline. A dozen breaths later, the gorgeous girl had already walked a kilometer away from Tanxiu. She stopped a dozen meters away from Tangxiu. Her pair of bright eyes carefully sized up Tangxiu a few times, and then carefully took out a painting from her bosom. After comparing it with Tangxiu, she shook her head with slight disappointment, folded the painting, and put it back into her bosom. Huh! Tangxiu's eyes opened in an instant as his callous eyes instantly stared at the alluring girl. He found that this girl, who looked to be in her 20s, had a much stronger cultivation than him, especially when she came to a dozen meters in front of him. "Who are you?" asked the gorgeous girl with her silvery bell-like voice. "I'm a guest who came here to eat," said Tangxiu indifferently. "Who are you?" "I'm the owner of this place." The gorgeous girl smiled. "Let me introduce myself. I'm Gu Xiaoxue, also an immortal cultivator." "What's your name?" "Who's your master?" "Tangxiu, a loose cultivator." Tangxiu cupped his fists. "Tangxiu." Gu Xiaoxue blinked, and the face in the painting appeared in her mind again. The name was the same, but why did the face look different? She thought about it, and felt that it should be the same name and surname, so she didn't delve into it. Instead, she smilingly said, "There are many martial artists who come to our everlasting feast hall, but only a few cultivators come here. The number of cultivators who have come to our place in the past 10 years is no more than 10. Tangxiu's expression moved. He was keenly aware of the difference between the two titles from Gu Xiaoxue's mouth, cultivator and immortal cultivator. After a moment of silence, he asked again, "Have you seen other cultivators?" "I have." Gu Xiaoxue nodded. "I also specifically went to many places to invite them to my everlasting feast hall as guests. Unfortunately, cultivators who understand the Tao of alchemy and pharmacology are as rare as phoenix feathers and qilin horns." As she spoke, her devastatingly beautiful face revealed a sense of disappointment. Tangxiu narrowed his eyes and nodded. "Since you're the owner of this place, can I ask you a question?" "Speak." Gu Xiaoxue smiled. Tangxiu asked, "Before I came here, I looked at this place from the outside and found that you guys have set up a formation here. This formation is very powerful. It can cut off water, lock dragons, gather spirit, draw meridians, and borrow the sky. The 5 combined into one, forming this feng shui treasure land. What is the name of this formation?" Gu Xiaoxue exclaimed in disbelief. You can actually see the existence of the water block dragon seal array." "Oh my god. Are you a formation master?" Bang bang. Tangxiu's heart was beating wildly, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. It must be noted that he was the one who created the water block dragon seal array. Aside from him and his little disciple, no one else knew about it. However, how could this array appear on Earth? Who was it? Could it be her? A huge momentum rose steadily from Tangxiu's body. In nearly an instant, the earth-shattering aura pressed down on Gu Xiaoxue. A bright light burst out from his eyes as he said in a deep voice, "Tell me, who arranged this water block dragon seal array?" Gu Xiaoxue was stunned. Never once in her wildest dreams did she expect that this boy, who looked almost the same as her, with such a weak cultivation, could actually exude such a terrifying aura. This aura made her very uncomfortable. The intense killing intent contained within made her subconsciously retreat a few steps. "It's my master!" Tangxiu shouted sternly. "Who's your master?" Gu Xiaoxue's brows slightly furrowed, and a bit of anger arose in her heart. She talked to Tangxiu in a good manner, but he was actually so rude to her. She immediately snorted coldly and resisted the aura exuded by Tangxiu. At the same time, she said with dissatisfaction, "Why should I tell you? Who are you to me anyway? Let me tell you, don't think that you can bully me just because I'm a girl. It's very easy for me to defeat you with your cultivation." Tangxiu's breath stagnated, and he immediately retracted the aura he released. As the saying goes, a wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. He admitted that he was not a match for the girl in front of him at all. Furthermore, he also realized that he lost his composure because he was too eager to know who arranged this water-block dragon seal array. I'm sorry, I forgot myself. Tan Xiu cupped his fists and said. Gu Xiaoxue coldly snorted, and also retracted the aura she released. Then she lightly said, Who my master is none of your business. Also, I don't like your attitude. Hurry up and leave after you finish your meal. Don't come to us again later. Tan Xiu's complexion slightly changed as he lightly said, I'm the guest, and you're the host. The host should follow the guest's order. You should understand this truth. I don't eat and drink for free, so I'll naturally pay for it. Gu Xiaoxue frowned and said, Then we don't welcome you here. Tan Xiu pondered and immediately said, So, you want to set a threshold for me? Trying to shut me out? That's right. Gu Xiaoxue revealed a proud expression. Tan Xiu lightly said, I heard that you have 1,000 revolution array here. Anyone who can break through the 1,000 revolution array can eat and drink for free here. I think I can give it a try. Lead the way. You. The proud expression on Gu Xiaoxue's face froze. Her master was the one who set the rules of the 1,000 revolution array. Anyone who could successfully challenge, it would become a VIP of the everlasting feast hall. Not only would they be exempted from all expenses, but they would also receive the best treatment. Tan Xiu calmly said, What? I can't challenge it. Gu Xiaoxue shook her head and said, Of course you can. However, it's impossible for you to break through the 1,000 revolution array with your cultivation. Even if you can barely break through the first layer, you'll be severely injured if you don't die on the second layer. This 1,000 revolution array has a total of 7 layers. Only by breaking through all of them can you be considered as a success. So far, only 2 people have successfully broken through to the 4th layer. Both of them are powerhouses who have been cultivating for more than 100 years. Tan Xiu asked, Don't tell me you don't have a VIP here? Gu Xiaoxue shook her head and said, No. Whoever can break through the 2nd layer and enter the 3rd layer of the 1,000 revolution array is the winner. In the past decades, a total of 6 people have successfully broken through the 2nd layer and entered the 3rd layer. Tan Xiu rolled his eyes inwardly. He was the one who created this 1,000 revolution array, so how could he not know its power? Even if one had reached the immortal realm, it would be extremely difficult to break through from the 1st layer to the 2nd layer. Even if an immortal with some strength entered the 3rd layer, 80% of them would be severely injured or obliterated. I'll give it a try. Tan Xiu calmly said. Gu Xiaoxue indifferently said, It seems that you won't give up until you reach the Yellow River. Since you want to try, then give it a try. It just so happens that I'm quite bored now. Come with me. Tan Xiu didn't speak again. He followed behind Gu Xiaoxue and walked into the depths of the jungle. Along the way, they encountered a large number of security guards in black suits. When they saw Tan Xiu behind Gu Xiaoxue, each and every one of them revealed a strange expression. Strange, this is the first time we see the little boss with a strange young man, right? What's the origin of that young man? Is he worthy for the little boss to personally accompany him? The little boss has grown up. Could it be that she also yearns for men and women? The young man behind her doesn't look ordinary. How is that possible? Isn't the little boss always arrogant and disdainful of men? How come she's walking together with a strange young man? That young man looks good, but he's absolutely not worthy of our little boss. In my eyes, no one in this world is worthy of the little boss. A toad lusting after a swan's flesh. How can an ordinary man touch the fairy-like little boss? Not worthy. Tan Xiu and Gu Xiaoxue's ears were sharp. Naturally, they heard the words of the security guards clearly. Gu Xiaoxue, who was walking in front, had her back facing Tan Xiu. The corner of her mouth was curved, and a deep smile crawled across her face. And Tan Xiu, who was behind her, smiled bitterly. Listening to the words of the security guards, he almost thought that he was a pile of cow dung. Gu Xiaoxue, this fresh flower, wanted to be inserted into his body. Pay. Tan Xiu drove this absurd thought out of his mind. His eyes moved from Gu Xiaoxue's side to the front. Those casual words also came out of his mouth. Your surname is Gu? It's Gu as in Gu, right? I once had an old friend who also had this surname. Gu Xiaoxue turned her head. Her eyes were filled with contempt as she stared at Tan Xiu. She once again walked forward. You don't need to flatter me. Breaking through the 1,000-revolution array is a sacred thing. Even if you smear honey on your mouth, I will not help you. Moreover, people with the surname Gu are as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. I absolutely have no relationship with them. Tan Xiu asked. You have no relationship with them? Does that mean you followed your master's surname? Your master's surname is Gu? Of course. Gu Xiaoxue raised her chin and said. Tan Xiu deeply looked at Gu Xiaoxue's back. His previously calm heart once again rippled. His favorite disciple had the surname Gu, and this surname was given by him. Gu Xiaoxue, have you ever heard the name Gu Yenner? What? Gu Xiaoxue was stunned. She suddenly turned her head. Her eyes were incomparably sharp. She stared at Tan Xiu and said, Who are you? How do you know my master's name? Is it true? A storm was set off in Tan Xiu's heart. He incredulously looked at Gu Xiaoxue and hurriedly said, Tell me, where is your master now? Where is she? Gu Xiaoxue angrily replied, I don't know. Tan Xiu said with a sinking tone, Answer me. This question is very important to me. Gu Xiaoxue sneered and said, You haven't answered me yet. How do you know my master's name? I know. You should have heard it from an elder, right? Humph. My master has not been in contact with outsiders for the past 10 years. It's impossible for you to have seen her. Chapter 82. All kinds of thoughts churned in Tan Xiu's mind. The feeling of déjà vu towards Gu Xiaoxue's master was getting more and more intense. However, he faintly felt that the time was not right. He had been in the immortal world for 10,000 years, but only 1 year had passed on Earth. And 6,500 years ago, Gu Yenner disappeared in the immortal world. Even if she accidentally came to Earth, it should be within a year on Earth. If she had been on Earth for decades, then wouldn't she be hundreds of thousands of years old in the immortal world? Tan Xiu felt that the matter was more and more fishy as he carefully analyzed it. He fell into silence while looking at Gu Xiaoxue's incomparably cold face. His EQ? Not enough. But his IQ was very high. He might be lacking when it came to dealing with people. But when it came to thinking about things, he was able to think about all aspects. Gu Xiaoxue was unwilling to say it, and he couldn't beat her. Therefore, he could only suppress his curiosity and no longer continue to ask. Of course, there was still a layer of worry in his heart. After all, even his woman and brother, who had been friends with him for hundreds of years, could betray him for benefits. Would that disciple still remember him as her master? After such a long time, would there still be a master and disciple relationship between them? Gu Xiaoxue looked at Tan Xiu's silent expression. A proud expression appeared on her face again. She hummed and said, Actually, it's not impossible for you to see my master. As long as you can break through the third layer of the 1,000-revolution array, I can take you to see her 3 months later. However, with your strength, let alone breaking through the third layer, I'm afraid you'll be seriously injured and have to withdraw from the second layer. Continue to lead the way. Tan Xiu's tone became extremely firm. Gu Xiaoxue said with a sneer, You really won't turn back until you hit the southern wall. You won't shed tears until you see the coffin. Since you insist on going your own way, don't blame me for not reminding you when you're seriously injured. Let's go. They walked forward for 100 meters. A security guard in a suit stopped them. Little boss, Grandmaster Xiao and Grandmaster Miao are here. They're waiting for you in front of the 1,000-revolution array. Gu Xiaoxue frowned and said, Why are they here again? 2 years ago, they were trapped in the second layer of the 1,000-revolution array and were unable to break into the third layer. Moreover, they were seriously injured at that time. Could it be that in these 2 years, not only did they recover from their injuries, their cultivation also advanced? The security personnel said, It looks like it's true. Gu Xiaoxue turned her head, glanced at Tan Xiu, and then walked towards the direction of the 1,000-revolution array in large strides. She had been very bored and lonely recently. Someone else was taking care of the everlasting feast hall's business, so she only cultivated every day. She had thought that it would be interesting to meet Tan Xiu today, but she did not expect that there would be 2 more. In the depths of the forest, surrounded by the lush forest was a square. It wasn't big, but there were some jade stones placed in every corner of the square. At the edge of the square, two middle-aged men were sitting cross-legged. Their deep eyes constantly swept across the square in front of them. "Brother Miao, how much certainty do you have this time?" Xiao Mingjin broke the silence and asked. Miao Wentong said confidently, 80%. Xiao Mingjin was surprised. "Are you that confident?" Miao Wentong said with a faint smile. "Brother Xiao, I'm afraid you're more confident than me, right? People who haven't broken through the 1,000 revolution array may not know that this 1,000 revolution array is actually not a real killing array, but an array used by cultivators to train their disciples. As long as you don't rashly break through it, you won't have to worry about your life. It really doesn't matter if you get injured. I think you should have benefited a lot from the 1,000 revolution array 2 years ago, right?" Xiao Mingjin nodded and said with a smile, "Indeed. The person who created this 1,000 revolution array is definitely a genius in the cultivation world. His strength must be extremely amazing. To be honest, if possible, I really want to worship the person who created this 1,000 revolution array as my master." "Ha ha ha, great minds think alike." Miao Wentong laughed. "You too came uninvited. Don't tell me you want to break through the 1,000 revolution array again? If I remember correctly, you have already broken through it 3 times. According to my master's rules, the 4th person who tries to break through the 1,000 revolution array needs to pay 1,000,000 yuan fee. If you want to break through, you must pay." Gu Xiaoxue slowly walked over with Tan Xiao. Her expression was tranquil, but her words were a bit cold. Xiao Mingjin and Miao Wentong saw Gu Xiaoxue and Tan Xiao. Although they were surprised about Tan Xiao's origin, they still stood up as fast as they could. They picked up the suitcases beside them and handed them over to Gu Xiaoxue, saying, "We've prepared the money. Please accept it." Gu Xiaoxue made a gesture to several security personnel nearby. Several security personnel quickly arrived and took the 2 suitcases. After checking and confirming that the amount of money was correct, they quickly took the 2 suitcases and left. Go and ring the 100 rings bell." "Yes." A big man cupped his fists and strode toward the distance. A few minutes later, bang bang bang. The bell's 27 rings reverberated in the world, passing into the ears of everyone in the everlasting feast hall. Many guests came out of their boxes, looking surprised as they listened to the bell, and inquired the attendants about the reason. "The 100 rings bell. Someone wants to break through the 1,000 revolution array. 27 rings, 9 for each person. A total of 3 people want to break through the 1,000 revolution array. Martial artists are going to break through the array to select the VIPs. The 100 rings bell has rung. All guests can go to the scene to watch. Today, the guests will be able to broaden their horizons." Along with the excited explanation from the attendants, the guests in the 108 boxes of the everlasting feast hall were led by the security personnel as they rushed toward the 1,000 revolution array. In one of the boxes, Jiarui Dao and his 3 apprentices were absent-mindedly listening to the attendant's explanation. Today, the most important thing for them was to serve Tan Xiao well and make Tan Xiao satisfied. Otherwise, in case Tan Xiao were to quit, not only would they go bankrupt, but they would also lose all their reputation. They would never be able to lift their heads in the professional gambler circle for the rest of their lives. 3 guests, do you want to go and have a look?" The young and beautiful waitress asked after explaining the situation to them. Jiarui Dao impatiently waved his hand and said, "We're not interested. Just go and do your thing." "Wait a minute." Gong Dalong suddenly stopped the attendant as he looked at Jiarui Dao and said, "Master, as far as I know, Grandmaster Tang seems to know some kung fu. Perhaps he is the one who is going to break through the 1,000 revolution array. Just think about it. Breaking through the 1,000 revolution array is something that only happens once in a year or 2. But Grandmaster Tang has come, and someone has already broken through. I think the possibility of it being Grandmaster Tang is very high." Jiarui Dao's expression moved. He also heard that Tan Xiao knew kung fu. He immediately nodded and said, "Then let's go and have a look. Even if it's not Tan Xiao, I'm afraid he will also go and have a look." In the jungle behind the everlasting feast hall, a large number of guests had arrived, and the entire edge of the square was already crowded with people. Dozens of security personnel of the Everlasting Feast Hall blocked everyone outside the square, forbidding anyone from entering even half a step. Gu Xiaoxue crossed her arms. Her eyes occasionally glanced at Tan Xiu, but most of them were lingering between Xiaomingxin and Miao Wentong. After 2 years, she really wanted to know how much progress they had made. Could they successfully break through the third layer of the Thousand Revolution Array? Little boss, it's almost time. The security captain came to Gu Xiaoxue's side and whispered. Gu Xiaoxue slightly nodded. She then looked at Tan Xiu, Xiaomingxin, and Miao Wentong as she lightly said, "Today, the 3 of you want to break through the Thousand Revolution Array. Regardless of life or death, it has nothing to do with our Everlasting Feast Hall. Whoever can break through to the 3rd floor will be a distinguished guest of our Everlasting Feast Hall." 3 people? Xiaomingxin and Miao Wentong looked at each other in dismay. At the same time, their gazes were cast on Tan Xiu. Xiaomingxin hesitated for a moment as he looked at Tan Xiu and said, "Little brother, do you also want to challenge the Thousand Revolution Array? This isn't a joke. If you don't have any real skills, you might really lose your life in there." Miao Wentong also nodded and said, "Yes, young people should be more pragmatic and not bite off more than they can chew. Although this Thousand Revolution Array is helpful to cultivators, but without strength, even if you don't die, you will still be injured." "I know." Tan Xiu looked at the 2 people who judged people by their appearance, but he couldn't feel any disgust in his heart. He was the one who created the Thousand Revolution Array, so how could he not know about it? However, he believed that he would be able to widen their horizons. Upon seeing Tan Xiu's appearance, Xiaomingxin and Miao Wentong secretly smiled wryly inside. They were loyal to the sun and the moon, but Tan Xiu simply didn't listen to their words. "Forget it." A trace of anger gushed out from the bottom of Xiaomingxin's heart as he indifferently said, "Since little brother is unwilling to give up until he reaches the Yellow River, then it's useless for us to say anything more." After saying that, he turned around and cupped his fists toward Gu Xiaoxue, and then strode into the square. The entire square looked like there were only some jades placed randomly, but those jades, as well as the array patterns that were invisible to the naked eye, arranged into the Thousand Revolution Array. The moment Xiaomingxin stepped into the Thousand Revolution Array, his footsteps suddenly stopped. After a moment, he began to walk again. In the eyes of the surrounding onlookers, Xiaomingxin was like a headless fly, as he repeatedly walked within the radius of more than 10 square meters. But for Tan Xiu and Gu Xiaoxue, as well as Miao Wentong, who had once challenged the Thousand Revolution Array, it was a different scene. Inside the Thousand Revolution Array, the moment Xiaomingxin stepped inside, it was as if he had arrived in another world. Looking at the scenery of the spring, where the grasses were growing and the nightingales were flying, and feeling the gentle spring breeze caressing his face, his spirit was highly concentrated. He had once challenged the Thousand Revolution Array, so he was very familiar with the first layer. Don't look at this beautiful mountain forest. It actually contained countless murderous intentions. Suddenly, a spring thunder exploded out of nowhere. The bright and beautiful sunshine was covered by the floating dark clouds, and the entire world turned a lot darker. A drizzle floated down from the sky, and this drizzle was very corrosive. "It's coming." Xiaomingxin's heart tightened. His eyes vigilantly looked all around. He suddenly found that in the surrounding woods, a spotted snake as thick as an arm was coming toward him. Humph! Having experienced this once, Xiaomingxin didn't panic. He reached out his hand and took out a yellow paper talisman from his bosom. With a flick of his wrist, the yellow paper talisman turned into a raging inferno, violently rushing toward the spotted snakes from all directions. Hiss! The spotted snakes hissed in the sea of fire, as they lost their lives in the sea of fire. But even more spotted snakes rushed forward wave after wave. Their bright red tongues and cold eyes were firmly locked on Xiaomingxin. However, a sharp dagger appeared in Xiaomingxin's hand. As he moved, the spotted snakes that were rushing toward him were all killed by him. Found it. Chapter 83. A few minutes later, his sharp eyes discovered a dark yellow snake that was only as thick as a wrist among the group of snakes. This little snake had a purple crown on its head, Under the protection of the group of snakes, it hissed continuously, like a commander on the battlefield, commanding the soldiers to kill. Go! The dagger in Xiaomingzhen's hand instantly left his hand and accurately shot the dark yellow snake 7 inches away from him. Buzz! With the death of the small snake, the world before Xiaomingzhen's eyes changed. The world that was originally overflowing with the scent of spring was now filled with flowers and the scorching sun. Outside the 1,000 revolution array, Tan Xiao narrowed his eyes as he looked at Xiaomingzhen, who was walking 7 to 8 steps towards the center of the square. He secretly nodded, although he couldn't see the situation inside the array. But for Xiaomingzhen to be able to quickly pass through the first layer, it could be considered good. Gu Xiaoxue and Miao Wentong shared the same thought. Brother Xiao, you're really amazing to be able to pass the first level in such a short time. If it were me, I'm afraid it wouldn't be so easy. The first layer of the 1,000 revolution array was the spring killing array, and the second layer was the summer killing array. I wonder what the third floor is. Miao Wentong could not help but sigh. Gu Xiaoxue squinted at him and lightly said, the 1,000 revolution array has a total of 7 layers. The first 4 layers correspond to the 4 seasons of spring, summer, autumn and winter. Behind them was naturally autumn slaying and winter slaying. He's already so old, and this is his second time challenging the array. If he's still slow, it'll be too embarrassing. Miao Wentong's mouth couldn't help but twitch a few times. It seemed that he was older than Xiaomingzhen. If he used more time than Xiaomingzhen to rush through the first layer, then he would really be disgracing himself. The surrounding crowd of onlookers looked at Xiaomingzhen with inexplicable expressions on their faces. Seeing him randomly walking all over the place, playing the act of burning yellow paper into a ball of fire, and then taking out a dagger to hack and slash, everyone couldn't help but not know whether to laugh or cry. He can't have lost his mind, right? Why did you do such a strange thing? What kind of trick are you playing? You want all of us to come here just to look at this thing? What 1,000 revolution array? It looks like it's real. I think he's just trying to mystify us. It's so boring. It was a good meal, but it turned into a fool's play. How boring. What the hell is this everlasting feast hall doing? Are you kidding us? Gu Xiaoxue listened to the discussion of the crowd and immediately made a gesture to the security captain. Immediately, the security captain loudly said, Gentlemen, you don't understand the reason. Let me explain it to you. This 1,000 revolution array is divided into 7 layers. As he explained, the people around him suddenly understood. However, they still held a skeptical attitude towards the mysteries of the 1,000 revolution array. Some people, in order to verify the authenticity of the array, attempted to break through the security guards and step inside. However, because there were too many guests, the security personnel were unable to stop everyone. More than a dozen people rushed into the 1,000 revolution array. A second or two after they entered, they stopped in unison. In fact, their bodies stiffened and their eyes widened in disbelief. Get them out! Gu Xiaoxue shouted. Suddenly, more than a dozen security personnel rushed into the 1,000 revolution array. They quickly appeared at the side of the dozens of lifeless guests and violently dragged them out of the array. Heavens! I didn't drink too much, did I? How come inside? Illusion, it's definitely an illusion. How can there be a world inside? It's really an array. Amazing. It's really amazing. Honey, pinch me. I want to feel the pain. There's really an array. As if awakened from a dream, the 10 people shouted one after another. The other guests suddenly understood that the square in front of them was probably really arranged into an array. Tan Xiao remained silent as he watched Xiaomingzhen constantly moving inside the 1,000 revolution array, constantly waving his dagger to attack. He found that the arrangement of the 1,000 revolution array here was extremely simple and crude. Compared to the 1,000 revolution array he had created, it was like heaven and earth apart. He was even confident that if he were to go inside, he would definitely be able to break the array easily. 20 minutes later. Huh? Tan Xiao's expression shifted as he looked at Xiaomingzhen, who was approaching the center of Guangzhou a dozen steps. Miao Wentong's expression turned solemn. He looked at Xiaomingzhen's pale face as a bit of worry emerged in his heart. because he could see that Xiaomingzhen was very strenuous. Yet he had already broken through the second layer and rushed to the third layer. This showed that his strength was much stronger than 2 years ago, even to the extent that he had reached the Everlasting Feast Hall's VIP status. Boom! A loud explosion sounded. Xiaomingzhen, who had just broken through the third layer of the Thousand Revolution Array, was directly thrown out. His body heavily smashed on the edge of the square. After half a minute, he struggled to prop up his arms and spurted out a mouthful of blood. "Brother Xiao, are you okay?" Miao Wentong dashed to Xiaomingzhen's side. Seeing that he was about to get up, he quickly reached out to support his arm and asked with a concerned expression. Xiaomingzhen spurted out a mouthful of blood. His complexion turned slightly rosy as he bitterly shook his head and said, "I'm fine. But I didn't break through the third layer. This Thousand Revolution Array is really abnormal." Miao Wentong gently patted his shoulder and said, "Don't bite off more than you can chew. You can break through the third layer. That's already very amazing. I don't even have the confidence to break through the third layer. Not to mention that you've finally become the Everlasting Feast Hall's VIP. Even if you can't eat later, you can still come here to eat and drink for free." Hee, Xiaomingzhen grinned. His mood was much better. Miao Wentong stretched his muscles as he walked toward the Thousand Revolution Array and said with a smile, "It's my turn now. I hope I can reach your level and experience the might of the Thousand Revolution Array's third layer." Tan Xiu watched Miao Wentong enter the Thousand Revolution Array. He then walked to Xiaomingzhen's side and grabbed his wrist. Under Xiaomingzhen's flabbergasted expression, he lightly said, "Your internal injury is serious. You need to recuperate your qi and blood in time. With your cultivation, you'll be able to recover in 10 days or 2 months." Xiaomingzhen pulled his hand back and said with dissatisfaction, "Nonsense. I know my own situation very well. This kind of injury is very normal for us cultivators." Tan Xiu lightly said, "Yes, it's normal, but it's not worth it to waste time to recuperate. I can give you a healing prescription. As long as you take the medicine according to my prescription, your internal injury will be completely healed in 3 days. However, since you're quite rich, I'll charge you a fee." Xiaomingzhen stared blankly for a moment. He looked at Tan Xiu again as he asked with a bewildered expression, "Are you really sure that I'll be able to recover in 3 days?" "Yes," Tan Xiu resolutely said. Xiaomingzhen said with a sinking tone, "All right, name your price." 1 million. Tan Xiu calmly said. Xiaomingzhen exclaimed, 1 million? 1 million for a prescription? You might as well rob someone. Tan Xiu lightly said, "Buy it or not, it's up to you. If it wasn't because of your sincere tone and persuading me not to break the Thousand Revolution Array, let alone 1 million, even if you give me 100 million, I wouldn't care about you." Xiaomingzhen was furious. However, he was, after all, a person with status. He took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in his heart. He then said with a sinking tone, "I promise you I'll buy it. However, you need to give me the prescription first. After I take the medicine, if the effect is really like what you said, I'll give you double the price." "It's a deal." Tan Xiu nodded as he looked at Miao Wentong in the Thousand Revolution Array. Gu Xiaoshua's black brows slightly wrinkled. After listening to the conversation between Tan Xiu and Xiaomingzhen, her line of sight never left Tan Xiu. After being silent for a long time, she leaned toward Tan Xiu and asked in a low voice, Do you know pharmacology?" "A bit," Tan Xiu casually said. Gu Xiaoshua quickly asked, "Twilight nightmare. Do you know about this disease?" "Twilight nightmare?" Tan Xiu's expression stagnated. He incredulously looked at Gu Xiaoshua and exclaimed, "How do you know about Twilight nightmare? This is Shade Demon Zhu Wushou's most insidious killing move." Gu Xiaoshua frowned and said, "I don't know what you're talking about. But I want to know, can you treat this disease?" "I can't." Tan Xiu shook his head and said, "He indeed couldn't treat it. It's not that he didn't know how to treat it, but he didn't have the means to treat it." Shade Demon Zhu Wushou was the immortal world's apex supreme. His cultivation was almost comparable to his former self. But Zhu Wushou's most powerful move was the Twilight Nightmare. Even if one was lucky enough to survive this killing move, they would fall into a nightmare. Occasionally, they would wake up, but there was no way for them to completely recover. To treat it, two extremely rare treasures were needed: chrono crystal and demonic revival grass. The demonic revival grass grew in the demon world's heart, which was a place with extreme energy. Apart from the few supremes of the demon world, who could barely reach the demon world's heart, it was simply very difficult for others to enter, let alone to obtain the demonic revival grass from there. Chrono crystal. Rumor had it that a spatial crack existed between the immortal and divine worlds. But apart from deities, no immortal dared to go there, because even a little bit of carelessness would cause one's soul to fly away and scatter in the spatial crack, consigning them to eternal damnation. To concoct the holy medicine to treat the twilight nightmare, one must have the chrono crystal and the demonic revival grass as the two main ingredients. Otherwise, no one would be able to cure it. Even Zhu Wuxiu didn't have the means to cure it. Gu Xiaoxue looked at Tan Xiao with disappointment. Once again, she revealed a distant look and looked at Miao Wentong inside the 1,000 revolution array. More than half an hour later, Miao Wentong successfully broke into the third layer. Although the time he spent was longer than Xiaomingzhen, the time he persisted in the third layer, autumn kill, was much longer than Xiaomingzhen. Cough cough. Miao Wentong coughed out a few mouthfuls of blood. His complexion was as pale as paper as he barely managed to walk out of the 1,000 revolution array. Brother Miao, are you all right? Xiaomingzhen supported him and asked with concern. Miao Wentong shook his head and squeezed out a smile. There's no danger to my life. But my injuries are serious. I won't be able to recover without 2 or 3 months of recuperation. Chapter 84. Xiaomingzhen looked up and glanced at Tan Xiao. He hesitated for a moment before he told Tan Xiao's words to Miao Wentong. Finally he said, I've promised him that if his prescription is really effective, I'll give him 2 million as a reward. Miao Wentong sneered and said, Are you kidding me? If there really is such a holy healing medicine in this world, let alone 2 million for a prescription, even if it's 20 million, I'd still be willing to buy it. Tan Xiao lightly said, You can try it. If it's really effective, I hope you won't go back on your words. I'll be waiting for you to send me 20 million. Humph. Ignorant brat. Miao Wentong coldly said. Tan Xiao coldly glanced at him as he turned around and walked toward the 1,000 revolution array. Miao Wentong loudly said, You're Tan Xiao, right? I advise you to give up. Although I don't know how powerful you are, but with your age, trying to break through the 1,000 revolution array is like looking for a beating. There are a lot of people here. Don't make a fool of yourself. Brother Miao. Xiaomingzhen quickly pulled Miao Wentong's arm and whispered, although he looked down on Tan Xiao and felt that Tan Xiao was too arrogant. But with their status, they wouldn't do anything that would be beneath their status. Gu Xiaoxue's mouth curled up as she faintly smiled while looking at Tan Xiao's back. She was secretly helpless in her heart. She had felt Tan Xiao's imposing manner, although it was very strong, but with her cultivation, she could naturally feel Tan Xiao's strength. Therefore, she was very sure that there was a huge gap between Tan Xiao and Xiaomingzhen and Miao Wentong. The two of them were barely able to break through to the third layer. But Tan Xiao might not even be able to enter the second layer. In the crowd, Jiao Dao and his 3 apprentices had already noticed Tan Xiao. However, he didn't expect that Tan Xiao would also challenge the 1,000 revolution array. Therefore, he and his 3 apprentices didn't come out to meet Tan Xiao. Taoist Jiao was a shrewd old man. Naturally, he also wanted to see the depth of Tan Xiao's strength. However, when he saw Xiaomingzhen and Miao Wentong coming out of the 1,000 revolution array, a bad feeling arose in his heart. This was because he was going to make a bet with his opponent tomorrow. Before the bet, the most taboo thing to do was to exhaust his mind, energy and body. If Tan Xiao was injured, what would happen to the bet tomorrow? We must stop it. Jiao Dao squeezed out from the crowd and rushed toward Tan Xiao. Then he shouted, Brother Tang, don't go inside. I have something to say. Tan Xiao's footsteps suddenly came to a halt. There was a puzzled look in his eyes as he looked at the approaching Jiao Dao and asked, What do you want to say? Jiao Dao forced a smile and said, Brother Tang, we still have to gamble with Chen Kai's people tomorrow. If by any chance something bad happens to you in the Thousand Revolution Array, then tomorrow. You don't believe me? Tan Xiu's complexion turned cold as he said with a sinking tone. Jiarui Dao forced a smile and said, "It's not that I don't believe you. It's because a professional gambler's biggest taboo is to exhaust his mind, energy, and body before the match. Only when you're in a good state of mind can you win every bet." Tan Xiu said without being salty or light, "You've been resting well every day. How come I don't see you winning?" "Humph. I've already made up my mind. Don't say anything." After that, he turned around and stepped into the Thousand Revolution Array. At the side, Miao Wentong burst into laughter. "Brother Xiao, did you see that? Even Tan Xiu's companion doesn't believe him. Do you think he has the ability to break the Thousand Revolution Array? Just wait. We'll have a joke to watch." Xiao Mingjin forced a smile and secretly sighed. Obviously, he also agreed with Miao Wentong's statement. Inside the Thousand Revolution Array, the moment Tan Xiu stepped inside, he wasn't surprised by the changes in the scenery of the world. After looking around, his eyes locked on a towering ancient tree. As his toes touched the ground, his body was like an arrow released from a bowstring. In less than a breath's time, he had already sprinted to his destination. Puff! A sharp Mitsubishi Army knife appeared in his hand as he stabbed the ancient tree's trunk with the tip of the knife. At this moment, a small dark yellow snake was pierced through 7 inches below its head. Buzz! The scenery of the world changed as the hot summer appeared. Hundreds of flowers bloomed and hundreds of birds sang. Tan Xiu sized up the surrounding environment. His eyes finally fell on a distant path. In the middle of that path, there was a stone tablet embedded in the ground. Almost without the slightest hesitation, he sprinted with his fastest speed. Time. His current cultivation was not enough. Before he had the valiant strength, he could only fight against time. In a flash, he sprinted to the front of the stone tablet. He clenched his fist and used all his strength to punch the stone tablet. Boom! The stone tablet was smashed. The lions and tigers that had just appeared in the surroundings instantly vanished. But the surrounding environment had also changed. Outside the Thousand Revolution Array, everyone's eyes were fixed on Tan Xiu. They looked at Tan Xiu with a strange expression. Their eyes revealed an inconceivable expression. They clearly remembered that Xiao Mingjin and Miao Wentong had walked more than 20 steps toward the center of the square. And it took them more than half an hour. How is this possible? Miao Wentong uttered a cry of surprise. His face was filled with an inconceivable expression. His eyeballs almost popped out from his eye sockets. Even more exaggerated was that, in order to prove that it was not an illusion, he raised his arm and rubbed his eyes. Then he looked at Tan Xiu in the square again. "It's not an illusion. He. How did he do it?" Xiao Mingjin's heart was also thumping at this moment. His face was also filled with shock. His lips squirmed a few times as he bitterly said, 10 seconds. He only used 10 seconds to successfully break through the second layer and enter the third layer. Is he still a human? How did he do it? Yes, how did he do it? At the side, Gu Xiaoxue was tongue-tied as she looked at Tan Xiu's figure. A storm was set off in her heart. She clearly remembered what her master had told her. In this world, except for one person, no one could easily break through the layers. Even the most powerful group of super experts in the other world couldn't do it. Even Master could only barely reach this level, right? Who is he? How could he see through the mystery of the Thousand Revolution Array? How could he find the core of each layer in an instant? Gu Xiaoxue's vision moved away from Tang Xiu's body with difficulty. She looked at the shocked expression on the faces of the people around her. Only then did she confirm that she was not dreaming. There really was someone who broke through the first 2 layers of the Thousand Revolution Array in less than 10 seconds and entered the third layer, the Autumn Strike. At this moment, Tan Xiu was not aware of the shock of the people outside. In front of him, the scene of the fruitful autumn kill array had already appeared. It was an orchard. The fruit trees were full of glistening yellow and bright red fruits. The faint fruity fragrance made people salivate. A group of wild geese flew over the orchard, leaving only a burst of calls. The effect of this simplified version is really bad. Tan Xiu was not in a hurry to act this time. Instead, He stared at a direction and quietly waited. Trespassing into this array, die. A roar came from the inside of the orchard. A ferocious-looking big man, whose whole body was wrapped in chains, quickly rushed out of the orchard. He waved a mace in his hand. The sharp spikes on the mace were suffused with a faint cold light. Tan Xiao squatted down and casually picked up a small stone from the ground. He faintly smiled and said, "When I first created this array, I really spent a lot of effort. But I left a secret door in each layer. Do you believe that I can defeat you with just a small stone?" Ridiculous. The ferocious-looking big man seemed to have spiritual wisdom. He waved the mace and fiercely smashed it toward Tan Xiao's head. Fall. Tan Xiao flicked his finger, and the stone instantly hit the ferocious-looking big man's throat. Almost in an instant, the ferocious-looking big man's body suddenly froze. The mace was only a foot away from Tan Xiao's head, directly suspended. With a gust of autumn wind, the ferocious-looking big man, with a face full of unwillingness, turned into particles and drifted away with the wind. Buzz! The scenery of the world changed again. The cool autumn wind also became incomparably cold. The place he was in was no longer a fruitful orchard. Instead, it was a world of ice and snow. White snow, as far as the eye can see. Winter kill? Tang Xiao straightly sat cross-legged and inserted the sharp dagger directly into the snowy ground in front of him on the left. A whoa! Rolling wolf howls came from the distant horizon. In just a few seconds, in the sky full of flying snow, countless snow wolves were rushing over. Outside the 1,000 revolution array, Miao Wentong's body swayed a few times. Because of his unstable qi and blood, coupled with the shock in his heart, he suddenly sat down on the ground. He seemed to be not aware of his own embarrassment. Looking at Tan Xiao, who once again walked 6 or 7 steps toward the square, his heart seemed to explode with thunder. The fourth layer? It must be the fourth layer. Miao Wentong suddenly remembered that before Tan Xiao entered the 1,000 revolution array, he mocked and ridiculed him. He originally thought that Tan Xiao would not be able to pass through the first layer. But he never dreamed that Tan Xiao not only passed through the first layer, but also passed through the second layer, the third layer, and directly rushed into the fourth layer. In a flash, he really wanted to see a crack appear in the ground in front of him. If there was, he would definitely crawl into it and never come out again to disgrace himself. Xiaomingzhen's mouth twitched. He turned his head with difficulty and looked at Gu Xiaoxue. At this moment, Gu Xiaoxue was stunned. She foolishly looked at Tan Xiao and almost raised her hand to slap herself, because she was clear about Tan Xiao's cultivation. But she never dreamed that Tan Xiao could actually break into the fourth layer. The 1,000 revolution array was not an ordinary array. Even a cultivator who was more powerful than her might not necessarily be able to break into the fourth layer. But how did Tan Xiao do it? How could he break into the fourth layer? Gu Xiaoxue remembered what she said to Tan Xiao before. A tide of regret surged in her heart. If she knew that Tan Xiao could break into the fourth layer, how could she bring shame to herself? A frog at the bottom of a well. Gu Xiaoxue's mind suddenly thought of this idiom. She felt that this idiom was really appropriate to describe her. Miss Gu Tan Xiao he. Chapter 85. Gu Xiaoxue was startled by Xiaomingzhen's sudden question. After calming herself down, she forced a smile and said, "You've already guessed it, so why do you still ask me? To be honest, his cultivation is far worse than yours. But who would have thought that he could actually break through to the fourth layer?" "Is it really the fourth layer?" Xiaomingzhen was dumbfounded. He had a few speculations in his heart, but now that it was confirmed, the shock in his heart had reached the point where it was difficult to increase again. His status was not ordinary, and his ability to judge people was even more formidable. But now he found out that he had really misjudged this time. A person can't be judged by their appearance, just like the sea can't be measured with a pail. He was really wrong this time. Gu Xiaoxue said, "I don't want to admit it, but it's the truth." Xiaomingzhen desperately swallowed his saliva. For a moment he didn't know what to say. He had seen a lot of cultivation geniuses before, but he had never seen or heard of such a monstrous talent like Tan Xiao. "I suspect that he should be an array grandmaster." Gu Xiaoxue hesitated for a moment and said in a low voice, "Are you kidding me?" Miao Wentong crawled up from the ground with difficulty and shouted with a somewhat hoarse voice. Gu Xiaoxue coldly glanced at him and snorted. If he's not an array grandmaster, how could he easily break the first 3 layers of the 1000 revolution array? His cultivation is not high, I'm sure of it. Your cultivation is indeed high, but can you break through to the 4th layer? This, Miao Wentong was speechless. He only felt a burning sensation on his face. It was as if a pair of invisible slaps had slapped his square face from left to right. It was really painful. More than 10 meters away, Jia Ruidao stared blankly at Tan Xiu's figure. His mouth was open so wide that even a duck's egg wouldn't be a problem. At his side, his eldest disciple Gong Dalong whispered, Master, Grandmaster Tang seems to be very powerful. He actually walked further into the square than the other 2. Jia Ruidao slowly turned his head. The vacant look in his eyes disappeared a lot as he bitterly said, What I don't want the most now is for him to rush to a higher layer. The higher the layer, the greater the possibility of him getting injured. I'm afraid his injuries will be more serious. Gong Dalong was stunned and fell into silence. He understood that his master's concerns were right. If Tan Xiu's injuries were severe and delayed tomorrow's bet, then the 2 of them would really be finished. Inside the 1000 revolution array, Tan Xiu looked at the approaching snow wolf, and the smile in his eyes deepened. If it was someone else, they would definitely be frightened out of their wits when they saw the snow wolves swarming towards them. However, he was different. He was the one who created the 1000 revolution array, so he knew how to break it. Aolo! The howls of the wolves joined together and pierced through the clouds. But strangely, the pack of wolves around him stopped a dozen meters away from Tan Xiu. Their green eyes glinted coldly, but they were not staring at Tan Xiu. Instead, they were staring at the Mitsubishi Army knife in front of Tan Xiu. Array. What was important was the formation pattern and the formation eye. Tan Xiu knew where the formation eye was, and he was also clear about the engraving of the formation pattern. The Mitsubishi Army knife in front of him on the left coincided with the formation eye, and was located at the connection point of the formation pattern. As long as the Mitsubishi Army knife was not pulled out, the surrounding wolves would not be able to rush over. And the 4th layer's winter killing. The most important thing was time. An incense stick worth of time. As long as he could hold on for an incense stick worth of time, the 4th layer would collapse by itself. Soon, an incense stick worth of time passed. Buzz! As the surrounding scene changed, the world of ice and snow dissipated, and was replaced by a yellow dirt path. On the side of the path was a large river. The river was surging and surging. An old man, wearing a straw raincoat and holding a fishing rod, sat alone on the bow of the boat in the river, quietly fishing. When Tan Xiu's figure appeared on the riverside, the boat moved without any wind and slowly approached Tan Xiu. Ferryman, Tan Xiu calmly said. The old man smiled slightly and said, Welcome, it's my honor to serve you. Tan Xiu flew to the boat and calmly said, Cross the river. Okay. The old man nodded and smiled. The boat glided and gradually sailed to the middle of the river. However, at this moment, the old man on the bow suddenly disappeared and was replaced by a gust of wind. The boat began to shake violently. In the river around the boat, swordfish constantly jumped up, and their jumping trajectory happened to be aimed at Tan Xiu. At the same time, a flock of flame birds flew in the sky. This kind of bird was burning with fire, and its sharp claws spread open as it rushed toward Tan Xiu. Xiu, Mom misses you so much. The scene in front of Tan Xiu changed slightly, and he appeared at home. And his mother, who was crying and washing her face, rushed up to him in surprise. Humph, Tan Xiu coldly snorted. As his aura suddenly rose, the surrounding scene instantly shattered. He had experienced this kind of illusion countless times. If it was in the past, he might be immersed in this environment for a long time. Even if he knew that it was not his real home, and not his real mother, he still could not help but be affectionate with his mother for a moment. But now, he had returned from the immortal world, and it was easy for him to see his mother. Therefore, he did not need this kind of illusion, nor did he have the slightest burden. Die for me! The Mitsubishi Army knife was waved again and again. Tan Xiu's figure also moved quickly. His current cultivation was very weak, and his strength was only 3,000 jin. It was very strenuous for him to kill these swordfish and flame birds. If he was not careful, he would be seriously injured or even killed. But he had rich experience in fighting, and this kind of scene was child's play for him. Not to mention, the requirement for this pass was not to kill all the swordfish and flame birds, but to persist until the boat reached the other side, which would be very fast. Outside the 1,000 revolution array, Gu Xiaoxue was already shocked and numb by Tang Xiu's lightning speed. Originally, she thought that for Tang Xiu to be able to break into the 4th layer, he should have reached his limit. However, Tang Xiu's success once again made her at a loss. Gu Xiaoxue's strength was very strong. She had reached the point where she could kill Tang Xiu with a wave of her hand. But she asked herself honestly, she absolutely could not do it to Tang Xiu's level. Since she started to break into the 5th layer at the age of 10, she had done it hundreds and thousands of times in the past 10 years. But never once did she break into the 5th layer. What was the world of the 5th layer? She had heard of it, but she had never seen it before. Even an array grandmaster can't do it to this point, right? Gu Xiaoxue regretted. She regretted that she should not have looked down on Tang Xiu before. Because Tang Xiu's heaven-defying ability to break into the array had broken her common sense. At this moment, Miao Wentong's complexion has become deathly pale. Looking at Xiaomingzhen beside him, he almost could not help but pull Xiaomingzhen and flee in distress. Disgraceful. He finally tasted the taste of disgraceful. That taste was very bitter, more bitter than gold thread. Idle. Xiaomingzhen's eyes were somewhat blurred as he muttered to himself. However, his words were like a sharp knife that fiercely stabbed into Miao Wentong's heart. The pain almost made him want to shed tears. As for the surrounding crowd, although there were a few people who left because it was too late, most of them were waiting. They did not know which layer Tang Xiu had broken into, but they were very clear that Tang Xiu's level was definitely higher than Xiaomingzhen and Miao Wentong's. Impossible! A cry of alarm came out from Gu Xiaoxue's mouth. Suddenly, everyone found that Tang Xiu's figure had moved closer to the center of the square by 7 or 8 meters. Xiaomingzhen turned his head and looked at Gu Xiaoxue, who had lost her self-control. He hurriedly asked, "Miss Gu, Tang Xiu, did he succeed again?" "Yes." Gu Xiaoxue, who was shocked to the point of numbness, nodded and said. Xiaomingzhen blankly said, "The 5th layer?" "He actually broke through the 5th layer and reached the 6th layer? Isn't this too terrifying?" "It's terrifying." Gu Xiaoxue's expression was complicated. Looking at Tang Xiu's figure, there was an indescribable feeling in her heart. Recalling the various situations after meeting Tang Xiu, she suddenly realized that she had never been able to see through Tang Xiu. It was like looking at the reflection of the moon in the water. Tang Xiu's whole body seemed to be shrouded by an illusory and misty aura. After a moment, Tang Xiu walked out of the 1,000 revolution array. His complexion was faintly pale, but he didn't seem to be in a difficult situation. The moment he came out, hundreds of eyes simultaneously fell on him. "Now, am I qualified to be the Everlasting Feast Hall's VIP?" Tang Xiu came before Gu Xiaoxue and calmly asked. Gu Xiaoxue subconsciously nodded. Then, she suddenly sobered up and hurriedly asked, "Tang Xiu, your cultivation is obviously very low. How could you break through the 6th layer? You must know, since my master arranged the 1,000 revolution array decades ago, although only a few people came to break through it, the 2 most powerful ones were barely able to break through to the 5th layer. No one has ever entered the 6th layer. How did you do it?" Tang Xiu indifferently said. "No comment." "You." Gu Xiaoxue's heart felt like it was being scratched by a cat. But looking at Tang Xiu's indifferent appearance, she was helpless even though she was angry inside. Tang Xiu no longer looked at her. His eyes shifted to Xiaomingzhen and Miao Wentong as he lightly said, "I'll give you the prescription later. Remember your promise." After saying that, he glanced at the pleasantly surprised Jia Ruidao and his disciple before he walked toward the attic, filled with a classical atmosphere outside the woods. Although he was not sure whether Gu Xiaoxue's master was his former disciple or not, he believed that there was absolutely a close relationship between the two. When he first heard the news about his favorite disciple, he was ecstatic. But after breaking through the 1,000-revolution array, his heart finally calmed down. Thinking about how his former best friend and lover could betray him. What if Tan Xiu didn't dare to think about it? He couldn't accept such a blow. Therefore, he directly chose to give up on getting to the bottom of this matter. Now the most important thing for him was to cultivate and strive to restore himself to his peak state. At that time, those who had hurt him and betrayed him would have to pay a painful price. He was not a ruthless person, but he was also not a soft-hearted person. If people don't offend me, I won't offend them. But if people offend me, I'll pay them back tenfold. He prayed to the gods and Buddhas to bless those who had hurt him, and wait for him to personally pay them back. Chapter 86. The Everlasting Feast Hall had a total of 3 floors, and was decorated in an antique style. The first floor was an open dining room with more than 200 dining tables. The second floor was a private room, with a total of 108 private rooms. It was spacious, bright, and comfortable. The third floor was the VIP area. The number of guests who were qualified to enter the third floor could be counted on one hand. As Tan Xiu arrived, the restaurant manager had already been notified and warmly greeted him. "Are you Mr. Tang? I'm the manager of the Everlasting Feast Hall, Chu Hanqing. The little boss has just informed me that the VIP lounge on the third floor is ready. You and your friends can dine there. Everything you need here is free of charge. Lead the way." Tan Xiu calmly nodded. Jia Ruidao looked a bit excited as he followed beside Tan Xiu and said with a smile, "Brother Tang, we're really basking in your glory today. You know, countless dignitaries who want to climb to the third floor are stopped by the security personnel here. I never thought that I would be able to climb to the third floor of the Everlasting Feast Hall." Tan Xiu shook his head and said, "It's just an external enjoyment. It's meaningless." Jia Ruidao forced a smile and said, "Everyone pursues different things. You can keep a normal mind when facing external things, but people like you are very rare." Tan Xiu thought for a moment, and felt that Jia Ruidao's words were quite reasonable. Everyone has their own pursuits. Some pursue fame and fortune, some pursue power and sex, some pursue material enjoyment, and some pursue spiritual sustenance. Just like himself, he only pursued 2 things: to spend time with his mother, and to cultivate. The third floor had a total of 18 rooms, each of which was nearly 200 square meters. Although the interior decoration was also antique, it was extremely luxurious. Even though Tan Xiu didn't have much research on antiques, he could see that there were many old objects inside. Along the river during the Qingming festival painting, just as Jia Ruidao entered the room, he noticed the calligraphy and painting on the wall. After observing it for a moment, he immediately exclaimed out loud. The restaurant manager said with a smile, "Our boss once participated in an auction in the harbor area. He bought this calligraphy and painting in that auction. I heard that he spent 9 digits to bid for it." Tan Xiu's expression changed as he asked, "Have you seen your boss?" "I wasn't talking about your little boss." The restaurant manager nodded and said, "Of course. Because I was addicted to gambling, I lost everything and even lost my position as the CEO of a listed company. At that time, his family was separated, and he didn't have enough to eat. It could be said that he was extremely down and out. Fortunately, I met boss. She paid off my debt, taught me martial arts, and let me work for her in the Everlasting Feast Hall. In the blink of an eye, more than 20 years have passed." Tan Xiu asked, "What's your boss's name? How old is he?" "We can't easily reveal our boss's name to others," said the restaurant manager. "But her age? In the past 10 years, I've only seen her 4 times. When I first met her, she looked about 20 years old, but the last time I saw her 10 years ago, she also seemed to be 20 years old. Actually, I also find it strange. It's as if time doesn't leave any traces on her body. 20 years old? She looks almost the same as Gu Xiaoxue." Tan Xiu frowned. The little girl he watched grow up was only 18 years old when she left him for the first time. Tan Xiu suddenly said, "Help me find a pen and a piece of paper. Please wait a moment." The restaurant manager immediately informed Tan Xiu's request through the intercom, and then put the menu in front of Tan Xiu and the others. When Tan Xiu and the others finished ordering, The pen and paper were handed to Tan Xiao. While waiting for the dishes to be served, Tang Xiao drew a portrait on the paper. What he drew was the appearance of his disciple in the immortal world. She was 18 years old, of flower-like age. Along with Tan Xiao's drawing, a vivid and lifelike portrait of a young girl was born. There was a beauty in the north. Her smile could topple a city, and her smile could topple a country. The girl in the painting had a sweet smile on her face, as if she had come to life. So beautiful. Jia Ruidao and his disciple, as well as the restaurant manager, were deeply attracted by the girl drawn by Tan Xiao. In a trance, they seemed to see a beautiful young girl, standing in front of them and smiling at them. Take a look, isn't that her? Tan Xiao looked at the restaurant manager and asked in a deep voice. The restaurant manager sobered up from his intoxication. His eyes reluctantly moved away from the drawing as he shook his head and said, "You drew a fairy maiden. Although our boss is also very beautiful, her appearance is completely different." "She isn't." A trace of loss and relief rose in Tan Xiao's heart. He wanted to see his disciple, whom he had raised and taught respectfully, but he was afraid that he would be involved with those who betrayed him. "Forget it. You go and do your work." "All right." The restaurant manager complied and left the hall. Delicious delicacies were continuously served, as well as jars of wine were placed on the table. Two young and beautiful waiters didn't leave the hall. They poured wine for Tan Xiao, Jia Ruidao, and the others, and then sat on the sofa on the other side of the hall, waiting for Tan Xiao and the others to greet them. The wine is good. It was Tan Xiao's first time drinking wine since he returned to the modern era. He carefully tasted it and nodded in approval. He had drunk countless good wines, and he had a very high talent in winemaking. But this everlasting feast hall's wine was also good. Not bad. Just not bad. Jia Ruidao gulped down the wine in one gulp, showing an expression of wanting to continue. But when he heard Tan Xiao's words, he suddenly froze. He had lived for 60 years, yet this was the first time he had tasted such a delicious wine. How come Tang Xiao only gave it a not bad evaluation? His three disciples couldn't help but shake their heads upon hearing Tan Xiao's words. They were all wine lovers, and it was also their first time tasting such a good wine. Therefore, they secretly ridiculed Tan Xiao's evaluation. "Brother Tang, this is not an ordinary wine. I dare say that if we were to order wine in the box on the second floor, it would definitely not be this wine. Although the wine provided in the box on the second floor is also good, it's far inferior compared to this," Jia Ruidao said with a smile. Tan Xiao raised his glass and said, "Drink more if you like it." Late at night, 12 o'clock, Tan Xiao, Jia Ruidao, and his disciples ate and drank to their heart's content as they directly left the restaurant. Since they didn't need to pay the bill, they saved a lot of money for Jia Ruidao and his disciples. It must be known that the cheapest meal in the box on the second floor would cost at least 100,000 yuan. Tonight, they had a sumptuous meal. Jia Ruidao secretly estimated that if he had to pay, he wouldn't be able to leave without at least 1,000,000 yuan. In the dim light of the night, 5 people were strolling on the shady forest trail. Occasionally, flying insects would linger around the dim lights on the roadside. Just as they were about to reach the parking lot, the road in front of them was blocked as mocking laughter entered their ears. "Oh, isn't this Grandmaster Jia Ruidao? You lost so much during the day. How come you still have the mood to come to the everlasting feast hall to drink at night? Don't tell me you want to drown your sorrows with wine." There were a total of 12 people in front of them. The one who spoke was one of the 3 youths in front of them. Tan Xiao didn't know who he was, but Jia Ruidao and his 3 disciples knew him. He was their nemesis Chen Kai, the famous hedonistic young master of Jingmen Island. Jia Ruidao took a step forward and coldly said, "Chen Kai, don't be insolent. We'll pay you back 100-fold for the humiliation you gave me before." Chen Kai burst into laughter and said, "Did I hear it wrong? Do you still have a chance to turn the tables? Tomorrow, I'll make you understand why the flowers are so red. Ha ha ha." "You," Jia Ruidao was furious. "Chen Kai, he's Jia Ruidao? A famous professional gambler?" A youth asked lightly. Chen Kai stared at Jia Ruidao provocatively. Then with a flattering tone he said, "Brother Chu, he's Jia Ruidao, the guy who almost lost his pants to me." The 3 guys behind him are all his disciples. That's right, the youngest one is his son, a prodigal son of a bitch. The youth looked at Jia Ruidao as he lightly nodded and said, Chen Kai, remember to leave a line for others. I'd like to see you later. If they bow their heads, I'll forget about this matter. That jade pendant is very good. I like it very much. It's mine later. Good, good, good. Consider it as a gift from me to you, Brother Chu. Chen Kai happily said. Jia Ruidao was stunned. He looked at Chen Kai and then at the youth. Suddenly, he flew into a rage and roared. Chen Kai, you motherfucker. That jade pendant belongs to this old man's wife. I'll find a way to win it back. If you dare to give it to others, don't blame this old man for going all out against you. Chen Kai disdainfully said. What I've won is mine. How I deal with it is none of your business. If you have the ability, then bring it on. This young master is not afraid of you. Chen Kai. The youth who spoke just now shouted in a low voice. Chen Kai shrunk his neck as he let out a hollow laugh and said, Brother Chu, this old bastard is looking for trouble. Jia Ruidao's eyes turned blood red as blue veins protruded on his forehead. His eyes looked as though he could devour someone as he glared at Chen Kai and said, I'll naturally win back what I've lost. Tomorrow, I'll make you look good tomorrow. The youth surnamed Chu looked at Jia Ruidao and lightly said, Generally, I won't return the things I've obtained. If you want the jade pendant, look for me. I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Chu Yi, from the imperial capital. Tan Xiao took a step forward as he looked at Chu Yi and said, You just said that one should leave a line for others to meet again in the future. Since that jade pendant belongs to Jia Ruidao's deceased wife, I think you should give him a chance. If he can win it back tomorrow, the jade pendant will be returned to him. But if he loses tomorrow, we'll never mention this jade pendant again. And this bet will be completely over. How about it? Chu squinted his eyes as he sized up Tan Xiao. With a faint smile he asked, Who are you? Tan Xiao. Don't deliberately throw the game on the gambling table. He's very smart, so he should be able to see it. Once he realizes it, he'll feel that it's an unfair advantage, and his impression of you will be worse. This. Chu suddenly felt that the jade pendant in his hand had become a hot potato. He angrily glared at Chen Kai and helplessly said, All right. I know what to do. All right, I'm done. I'll hang up. Chu hung up the phone and sent the restaurant manager away. He then looked at Bai Tao and said, We'll see him tonight. It should be him. Bai Tao's expression was complicated as he forced a smile and said, Tan Xiao is really something. He can really cause a commotion wherever he goes. What should we do now? Chu said, Let's do it tomorrow. Regardless of winning or losing, we'll express our goodwill to him. All right. Bai Tao nodded, although it was still unclear whether Tan Xiao could invite Kong Xiao or not. But he had to give face to Buddha. After all, Tan Xiao had a good relationship with Long Jingyu, and they were also Long Jingyu's friends. It was indeed not worth it to have a falling out over a jade pendant. Chen Kai looked at Chu and Bai Tao in a daze. Never in his dreams had he ever thought that these two were friends of Jia Ruidao. The most terrible thing was that they even wanted to express their goodwill to each other. He suddenly felt that he had not flattered the right person this time. Instead, it was like he had slapped the horse's hoof. Big brother Chu, how about I return the jade pendant to them? I'll also return the money I won from them? Although Chen Kai's heart was full of pain, he still probed. Chu shook his head and said, No need. Tomorrow's gambling will be carried out as usual. Remember, don't let Yi Taifu throw the game. And don't tell him about tonight's matter. This? Chen Kai was secretly delighted inside, but he looked hesitant on the surface. It's decided, Chu said resolutely and decisively. In the presidential suite on the top floor of the Jarvis Hotel, Tan Xiao was concentrating on practicing the gambling techniques taught by Jia Ruidao. His control was amazing. After repeated practice, in just 3 to 4 hours, he had already mastered every gambling technique to the point where it was incomparably pure. It's not that difficult. Tan Xiao tried to steal the cards and change the cards. He easily did it. His hand speed was extremely fast, and his control of strength was just right. Even if he were to gamble with others in the casino, The other party wouldn't be aware of it. Suddenly, he missed the days when he had a storage ring. If he had a storage ring, he could easily put any gambling tools in it. At that time, even if he were to secretly cheat, he wouldn't be able to find any trace. The next day, Tan Xiu got up very late. Since the gambling would start at 2 p.m., he woke up at 10 a.m. He was full of energy after washing his face and rinsing his mouth. After contacting Jia Ruidao, the five of them ate something and then drove to Jingmen Island's Paradise Club. Recently, almost all the gambling addicts in Jingmen Island had heard about the gambling in the Paradise Club. Yesterday, after Jia Ruidao had left halfway, the gambling house had become even more heated. A lot of people had already concluded that today's gambling house would be the last one. Therefore, when Tan Xiu and Jia Ruidao arrived at the Paradise Club, a large number of guests had already arrived. The crowded situation made them look at each other in dismay. It must be Chen Kai. This bastard deliberately leaked the news to make us lose face. Jia Yele was a narrow-minded person. This scene suddenly made him think of something bad, so he gnashed his teeth and said, "Shut up." Although Jia Ruidao also had the same idea. But at this moment, with Tan Xiu by his side, he didn't want Tan Xiu to think that he and his father were narrow-minded and gossipy people. He and Tan Xiu had been in contact until now, so he was very clear about Tan Xiu's character and character. If they didn't perform well, they would disappoint Tan Xiu. At this time, the surrounding guests also noticed Jia Ruidao and his disciples. They stopped one by one and pointed at Jia Ruidao and his disciples while whispering. "Did you see that? That's Jia Ruidao. Those three beside him are his disciples. Oh yes, one of them is his son. He's a troublemaker, a black sheep. That unlucky old Jia. This time he bit a hard bone. I hope he won't break his teeth. However, I haven't seen the young man beside him. The father conquers the country, and the son loses the country. Jia Ruidao has such a son. It's really 8 lifetimes of bad luck. If I had such a prodigal son, I would have strangled him to death. Miserable. It's really miserable. Someone has calculated that Jia Ruidao's group has recently lost 5 to 600 million yuan, and that jade pendant is said to be the only thing left behind by his wife. If there's a win, there's a loss. Sooner or later, a professional gambler will fall in it. Chapter 88. Although the voices of the surrounding guests were not loud, Jia Ruidao and his 3 apprentices could still hear them clearly. Their complexions turned ugly one by one. This was especially true for Jia Yele. His originally handsome face had turned completely red, and his face was filled with shame and anger. Tang Xiu walked beside Jia Yele and glanced at him from the side. Then, he lightly said, "If you can't even endure such humiliation, then your achievements in this life will be very limited. You don't need to gamble today, just admit defeat." Jia Yele's anger was as if a basin of ice water was poured on him. What he was looking forward to the most was that Tan Xiu could take revenge for them. If Tan Xiu were to give up now, then they would have no hope at all. "Grandmaster Tang, don't worry." Jia Yele bowed his head and said. Tan Xiu nodded and walked to the luxury liner docked on the shore. The entire liner was 135.06 meters long and 16.5 meters wide, with a standard displacement of 24,320 tons and a height of 10.3 meters from the waterline to the deck. It could carry a total of 2,000 passengers and crew. It had a total of 4 floors. The lowest floor was the engine room and power room. The second floor was the passengers' room. The third floor was the restaurant, dance hall, KTV, gym, and other leisure and entertainment venues. And the fourth floor was the casino. Jia Ruidao was very familiar with this place. Under his lead, the 5 of them booked a few rooms on the second floor, and then quietly waited for the liner to set sail. Since gambling was illegal, the liner would sail into the international waters every time the gambling started. The power of science and technology cannot be underestimated. Tan Xiu stayed in the room for a while before he left alone, and went to the deck outside. At this moment, the liner had already set sail. Although its speed was slow, it still braved the wind and waves as it sailed toward the boundless sea. At this time, a lot of tourists had already settled down and came outside to enjoy the sea scenery. The noisy atmosphere made Tan Xiao, who liked peace and quiet, frown deeply. He observed the surroundings, and finally stopped for a moment at the glass window on the 4th floor. The 4th floor. Tan Xiao entered the viewing hall, and sat near the window. There were not many people here. Only 2s and 3s of people sitting everywhere, whispering to each other. A few minutes later, a middle-aged man came to Tan Xiao accompanied by a few men who looked very successful. "Hello, Mr. Tang." The moment Miao Wentong saw Tan Xiao, he wanted to run away immediately, because facing Tan Xiao, he would be reminded of the embarrassing scene last night. However, he had to admit that Tan Xiao was really amazing. After a night of self-reflection, he was sure that he had misjudged people, said the wrong things and done the wrong things. Therefore, after concluding his own mistake, his admiration for Tan Xiao was born spontaneously. "It's you." Tan Xiao frowned, and the expression on his face turned cold. Miao Wentong was keenly aware of Tan Xiao's attitude, and suddenly felt a little embarrassed. However, he was thick-skinned enough. In order to ease the relationship with Tan Xiao, he immediately said, "Mr. Tang, I didn't sleep for half a night last night, and conducted a serious self-reflection. Therefore, I apologize for my attitude yesterday. I hope that you, the Prime Minister, will be magnanimous and not stoop to my level." Tan Xiao still sat as steady as a mountain and indifferently said, "You have a good attitude." Miao Wentong quickly said, "It's my fault, so I naturally have to correct it. Mr. Tang, I hope you can give me some face to make up for my mistake yesterday. I'll invite you to the Paradise Club today to formally apologize to you." "No need." Tan Xiao directly refused. The several middle-aged men standing next to Miao Wentong were all business elites in various industries. For many people, their status was distinguished, and it was natural for them to be respected by others. However, Tan Xiao's attitude seemed to have touched their bottom line. Miao Wentong was their distinguished guest, but Tan Xiao refused him without giving any face, which made them feel humiliated. "Brother Miao, who is this?" A middle-aged man couldn't figure out Tan Xiao's background, so he asked. Miao Wentong looked at Tan Xiao with an awkward expression. He was barely able to get rid of the embarrassment when the middle-aged man next to him asked. However, he had seen countless people in his life and was very smart. He could tell that Tan Xiao didn't like to be disturbed just by looking at Tan Xiao's appearance. Therefore, he simply introduced, "This is Mr. Tang." Immediately after, Miao Wentong took out a business card holder from his pocket and took out a business card. He then put it in front of Tan Xiao and said, "This is my business card, Mr. Tang. You can call me whenever you have time. I'll owe you this apology banquet first." After saying that, he didn't even ask Tan Xiao for his business card. He nodded to the people around him and strode to the other floor of the viewing hall. His action made the business elites around him look at each other in dismay. A deep mystery arose in their hearts. Who is he? Who is he? Miao Wentong was the head of the Miao group in Qingzhou. He was a famous and powerful figure in the entire Qingzhou. Moreover, it was rumored that Miao Wentong also practiced martial arts and was very powerful. The security company he established could be ranked among the top 10 in the country. How could such a powerful figure like him be so submissive to a young man? Several business elites of Jingmen Island exchanged glances with each other. They then took out their business cards and put them on the table in front of Tan Xiao. They then introduced themselves in the simplest language and followed Miao Wentong. "These people are really boring," Tan Xiao muttered inside. He grabbed the business cards and stuffed them into his pocket without looking at them. He was not good at interpersonal communication. Even in the immortal world, recalling the past events, Tan Xiao's heart sank. Because of Jia Ruidao's matter, he would have to waste a few days. Therefore, he decided that regardless of the outcome, he must thoroughly settle this matter, and then look for herbs, ores, and other rare treasures that could help him cultivate. On the other side, in front of the viewing window, a middle-aged man turned his head and glanced at Tan Xiao. Then, he looked at Miao Wentong and asked in a low voice, "Brother Miao, what's the origin of that young man's surname Tang? He didn't even give you face?" "Yeah, who the hell is that kid? Isn't he too arrogant?" Another middle-aged man spoke with a bit of indignation in his tone, yet his voice was very low. Miao Wentong forced a smile and said, "You should have heard about what happened in the Everlasting Feast Hall last night, right? Xiao Mingjin and I successfully broke into the third layer of the Thousand Revolution Array and became the Everlasting Feast Hall's VIPs. And he's the one who broke into the sixth layer." "What? How is that possible?" "Heavens!" Several Jingmen Island's business elites suddenly looked shocked and exclaimed out loud. Miao Wentong forced a smile and said, "My reaction was the same as yours. I also thought it was impossible. But the fact is that I saw it with my own eyes. How could I be wrong? The reason why I apologized to him was because I ridiculed him before he broke into the Thousand Revolution Array yesterday. As a result, I was slapped in the face." A middle-aged man whispered, "Brother Miao, he's too young. He looks like he's in his 20s. How could he be so powerful?" Miao Wentong forced a smile and said, "You ask me, but who should I ask? In short, we shouldn't provoke such a young man with unfathomable strength and aptitude. In this world, it's better to have more friends than more enemies." Yes, yes, yes. Several people repeatedly nodded in agreement. At 1:50 p.m., Tan Xiao came to the casino on the fourth floor. At this moment, the casino was crowded with gamblers trying their skills in front of all kinds of gambling equipment. The Paradise Club provided gambling venues, but they wouldn't intervene in the gambling. However, the Paradise Club would take a cut of the total amount of gambling on each table, although it was only 1%, but they still made a lot of money every day by taking a cut. "Grandmaster Tang, the gambling will be held in the VIP private room. My master is already waiting for you in the VIP private room." Gong Dalong was waiting in the casino's lobby. Upon seeing Tan Xiao's arrival, he immediately respectfully greeted him. Tan Xiao nodded and said, "There are only a few minutes left before the gambling starts. Take me there. I still have other things to do after this game." "All right," Gong Dalong respectfully replied. In the VIP private room of hundreds of square meters, all kinds of gambling equipment had been prepared. Apart from Jia Ruidao and his apprentices, as well as Chun Kai and his professional gambler Yi Taifu, there were also hundreds of gamblers who came to watch. The gamblers who could come to this VIP private room were not ordinary. At least, they must be recognized by one of the parties before they could be allowed to enter. Not only Miao Wentong, but also several Jingmen Island's business elites. Upon seeing Tan Xiao's arrival, Miao Wentong suddenly stared blankly. It seemed that he knew one of the gambling parties. The others also looked at each other in dismay. Although there were many people in the VIP private room, the order was very good. More than 20 security personnel in black suits ensured that no one would disturb the gambling house during the process. "Brother Tang, you finally came. The gambling game is about to start." Jia Ruidao and Tan Xiao were burning with impatience as he quickly came to greet him. Tan Xiao said, "I know what I'm doing." His eyes looked at Chun Kai, who was sitting across the table. However, he found that Chun Kai's eyes were a bit erratic. On the contrary, the bald middle-aged man beside Chun Kai had a bad expression in his eyes. He rubbed his hands and looked eager to try. Tan Xiao walked a few steps forward. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, he looked at the middle-aged man and asked with a sinking voice, "Are you Yi Taifu, the professional gambler known as Golden Finger in Macau?" The middle-aged man raised his chin and looked at Tan Xiao with contempt and said, "Yes, it's me. Who are you?" Jia Ruidao lost and didn't dare to come to the table, so he invited you to gamble with me? Tan Xiao pulled out a chair and sat opposite Yi Taifu. He then said indifferently, "Yes. Today, I'll accompany you to play. However, I'm afraid of trouble, and I don't like complicated gambling games. How about we play something simple today?" Yi Taifu asked, "How simple?" Tan Xiao said, "Let's tie a golden flower and compare the size. What do you think?" Tie a golden flower? Compare the size? Yi Taifu looked at Tan Xiao with a strange expression. He then said with a smile, "Are you sure you want to compete with me in this? I'll tell you in advance that the bet can't be too small. The base bet is 1 million. Do you dare?" "Why wouldn't I dare?" Tan Xiao's eyes turned cold as he happily said, Chapter 89. Jia Dao, who was standing next to Tan Xiu, immediately reminded him, "Brother Tang, my jade pendant." Tan Xiu glanced at him and lightly said, "Don't be impatient. Since the other party has given us the opportunity, I believe they won't go back on their words." Alright. Jia Dao was a bit reluctant, but he didn't dare to go against Tan Xiu's words at this time. A strange expression appeared on Miao Wentong's face in the crowd. He didn't expect that Tan Xiu would turn out to be one of the gambling parties. He knew that Tan Xiu was a cultivator and had great attainments in arrays. But he didn't expect that Tan Xiu was also a gambler. Originally, he was somewhat reluctant when he was pulled over by several Jingmen Island's business elites. But now, a strong interest arose in his heart. He wanted to see how strong Tan Xiu, who had reached the heaven-defying realm in breaking arrays, was in gambling. At this time, from the VIP private room's door, Ouyang Lulu came in with a middle-aged woman wearing white gloves. Chu Yi and Bai Tao followed behind them. "Welcome everyone to my Paradise Club. As the name suggests, this is a paradise for the guests. I hope you can have a good time here. Let me introduce myself. I'm Ouyang Lulu, the owner of the Paradise Club. The one beside me is the most outstanding dealer of our Paradise Club casino. I can guarantee that she will be the one presiding over this gambling house. She will be absolutely fair and just." Ouyang Lulu observed Tan Xiu and Yi Taifu a few times as she spoke with a beaming smile. Clap, clap, clap. Warm applause reverberated in the VIP private room. The effect of a beautiful woman was very good, and the effect of a noble beauty was even better. Whether it was her figure or appearance, Ouyang Lulu belonged to the world's first class. Her words won the applause of the entire hall. The charming dealer came to the gambling table and calmly said with a smile, "Have the two of you decided on the method of gambling?" Yi Taifu said, "Tai Jin Hua." The dealer's expression froze as a smile outlined on the corner of her mouth. As the top dealer of the Paradise Club, she presided over almost all big gambling houses. However, there were very few people who would play the golden flower in such a big gamble, especially when two people were betting against each other. She looked at Tan Xiu and asked with a smile, "Are the rules set? How much is the base price? What is the minimum increment for each bid? What's the upper limit?" Yi Taifu stood up, his arms propped on the gambling table as he grinned and said, "This little brother is very arrogant and doesn't want to waste time here. Therefore, I suggest that the minimum bid should be 1 million, and each increment should not be less than 1 million. Also, there's no upper limit." The dealer looked at Tan Xiu. Tan Xiu said indifferently, "I have no opinion." The dealer nodded and said, "Since the two of you have made your decision, then we'll respect this bet. Now please show me your chips." Jia Dao quickly took the chips from his son and placed them in front of Tan Xiu. Then he forced a smile and said, "Brother Tang, I've lost all the money I borrowed. There were only 56 million left. You see." "Enough," Tan Xiu said indifferently. A few meters away from the gambling table, Yi Taifu heard Jia Dao's words. He suddenly burst into laughter and said, "I thought that today's bet would be big. Turns out you only have 56 million left. Boring, really boring. I say, Jia Dao, you're a famous professional gambler. Don't tell me that you can't borrow money from others anymore." Ha ha ha. Many of the onlookers had seen the bet between Jia Dao and Yi Taifu before. They also knew that Jia Dao had lost a lot of money recently. However, the winner was the king, while the loser was the thief. The loser would never be praised. Suddenly, the sound of discussion sounded in the surroundings. Jia Dao is actually strong on the outside but weak on the inside. How much money did he lose? It's just a few 100 million, and now he can't borrow money? Is it because his character is too bad? Or is he not good at making friends? He deserves to lose. His capital is so little, yet he still dared to continue gambling. He really doesn't know how he died. A few days ago, I saw him lose so much that his eyes turned red. He even lost the only relic left by his wife, a jade pendant of excellent quality. I thought that I would see an unprecedented bet today, but I didn't expect that Jia Dao would be so poor. 56 million? I'm afraid the speed at which he loses today is even faster than before. Yeah, with such a small amount of capital, Letting such a young man to gamble on the stage. Isn't this the same as giving money to others? I've seen stupid people, but I've never seen someone stupid to this extent. I regret coming. Jiarui Dao was a professional gambler. His gambling skills were superb, and his hearing was naturally very good. The surrounding people's discussion was clearly heard by him. In a flash, his old face turned red, and his eyes were filled with grievance. Even his 3 apprentices' eyes were almost spurting out flames of anger. They were glaring at Yi Taifu, wishing that they could pull out his tendons and skin him alive. Tan Xiu looked at Yi Taifu with cold eyes. He secretly sneered in his heart. Although standing high and seeing far, standing high also meant falling hard. If he lost this bet, then so be it. But if he were to throw away his helmet and throw away his armor, and lose everything, when the time comes, he would probably regret his arrogance to the point that his intestines would turn green. Less nonsense, let's begin. Yi Taifu arrogantly gave Tan Xiu a provocative look. He sat back on the chair and said with a sinking tone, "Let's begin." Ding! The dealer nodded and pulled the bell. The entire VIP private room suddenly quieted down. She took the 8 decks of cards from the waiter and placed them on the table. Then she took out a brand new deck of cards. After a dazzling shuffle, she said, "Both sides, please check the cards." "No need." Yi Taifu believed in the fairness of the Paradise Club Casino, so he directly refused. Tan Xiu also shook his head. He was not afraid of the other party's tricks. Moreover, if the other party really wanted to play tricks, even if he checked the cards, he wouldn't be able to find anything fishy. The dealer slightly nodded. After cutting the cards, each person was dealt 3 cards, and then the rest of the cards were placed on the table in front of her. Tan Xiu picked up his card and casually glanced at it. A bit of a smile was revealed on his face. He had been paying attention to the dealer's action of shuffling the cards. Others might not be able to see it with their eyes, but he could clearly observe it with his spiritual sense. He even knew which card was in the stack, what number it was, and what kind of flower it was. A pair of 2s and a 5 of hearts. Tan Xiu looked at his card and observed the other side's cards through his spiritual sense. To his satisfaction, the first deck of cards was bigger than the other side. Because the other side's biggest card was an ace of spades. The other 2 cards were a 5 of hearts and a 3 of hearts. 1 million. Yi Taifu revealed a trace of a smile. He grabbed the chips in front of him and directly threw them in the middle of the table. Tan Xiu pretended to hesitate for a moment. Then, he also grabbed the chips in front of him and threw them in the middle. However, Yi Taifu had been staring at Tan Xiu's expression. Tan Xiu's moment of hesitation was keenly caught by him. Therefore, he once again grabbed the chips, threw them and said, 2 million. Tan Xiu also directly threw 2 million chips and said, "Call." Yi Taifu was startled. He deeply looked at Tan Xiu, threw 2 million chips and said, "Continue to call." According to the cards, Yi Taifu was very clear that his cards were very small. But he didn't want to give up in the first round, especially when he was keenly aware of Tan Xiu's moment of hesitation. He guessed that Tan Xiu's cards were absolutely not big. Moreover, this first round was just an appetizer. Even if he really lost in the end, he wouldn't lose much money. Chun Kai had promised that today's gambling stake would total to 500 million. "I also call," Tan Xiu said again. Yi Taifu sneered inwardly. In order to intimidate Tan Xiu, he directly pushed the pile of chips in front of him, which represented 10 million, and said with a sinking voice, 10 million. Tan Xiu was obviously stunned for a moment. He didn't understand where Yi Taifu's confidence came from. He even bet 10 million all at once. In addition to the money on the table earlier, each of them had taken out 14 million in this round. However, no matter what the other party's reason was, his cards were bigger than the other party's, so he didn't need to be afraid. 20 million. Tan Xiu pushed the chips and calmly said. Yi Taifu's brows wrinkled. He looked at Tan Xiu's appearance. He thought that Tan Xiu was pretending to be calm, but in fact, he also had the same intention of intimidating him. Therefore, he once again pushed out 20 million chips and lightly said, "It's just the beginning. No need to play so big. I'll open your cards with 20 million. Are you sure?" Tan Xiu calmly asked. Yi Taifu sneered. Of course I'm sure. Don't tell me you don't want to open your cards? Tan Xiu didn't speak, and directly opened his cards. In a flash, Yi Taifu's complexion turned red. An unwilling expression was revealed in his eyes. He had guessed that Tan Xiu's cards were not big. Looking at Tan Xiu's cards, he knew that his guess was correct. However, this small card was enough to crush him to death. However, in order to not let Tan Xiu's momentum rise, he casually threw away the cards in his hand and lightly said, Experts don't win the first 3 rounds. Seeing that you're a young man, I'll let you taste the taste of winning money. But after the 3rd round, you must be mentally prepared. Tan Xiu looked at the dealer, who pushed all the chips in the middle of the table aside from the 1 million chips. A trace of a smile appeared on his face as he nodded and said, Thank you for letting me win. I'll wait and see. The first round, he had won a whopping 34 million. This kind of situation made him sigh. Winning money in gambling was too easy. No wonder so many people liked to gamble. After all, everyone wanted to have the dream of suddenly becoming rich. Jia Rui, who was standing beside Tan Xiu, had a trace of happiness on his face. After all, Tan Xiu had a good start. This was a very auspicious event. Even his 3 apprentices were beaming with happiness. They were extremely satisfied with Tan Xiu's first win. The people who were watching the battle all had surprised expressions on their faces. After all, they didn't expect that an unknown young man would be able to win against the famous Yi Taifu in the first round. Although Yi Taifu said that he would let Tan Xiu win, everyone could see that his words were insincere. Chapter 90. The second game. After the dealer shuffled and dealt the cards, he looked at Tan Xiu and said, Mr. Tang won the last game. This time, it's Mr. Tang's turn to speak first. This time, Tan Xiu didn't open his 3 cards because he could use his divine sense to observe his cards. He could also observe Yi Taifu's cards. This kind of magical cheating method was absolutely a divine tool to swindle people. 10 million. Tan Xiu pushed out 10 million chips and said without batting an eyelid. Yi Taifu saw that Tan Xiu didn't look at his cards. In order to not lose his momentum, he also chose to hide his cards and directly pushed out 10 million chips and said, I follow. 20 million. Tan Xiu didn't even blink and pushed out his chips again. Yi Taifu frowned and pushed out 20 million chips again and said, Continue to follow. 50 million. Tan Xiu calmly said, What? Yi Taifu was stunned. His eyes revealed a disbelieving expression. He had been a professional gambler for more than 20 years. But this was the first time he met someone like Tan Xiu. This was only the second game. But Tan Xiu didn't even look at his cards and directly threw out 80 million chips. One must know, they were playing Golden Flower. Tan Xiu had just won 34 million. Adding his original capital, he only had a total of 90 million. In other words, once Yi Taifu followed, he was bound to see Tan Xiu's cards. This was also the last time he would bet. After hesitating for a moment, he reached out and touched his 3 cards. 7 of hearts, 7 of spades, 5 of clubs. His biggest card was 7 pairs? Yi Taifu was silent for a moment. He pushed out 100 million chips and said with a sinking voice, I follow. Look at your cards. Tan Xiu faintly smiled. He reached out and opened his 3 cards, Jack of hearts, Jack of spades, and 3 of diamonds. His biggest card was J pairs. In an instant, Yi Taifu's complexion turned pale. He never dreamed that the second game would turn out to be like this. Not only did he lose, but he also lost 131 million yuan. Including the 34 million yuan he lost in the first round, he had lost 165 million yuan in just 2 rounds. Yi Taifu raised his head and glanced at Chen Kai at the side. He saw that Chen Kai's complexion was unsightly. Suddenly, he felt somewhat guilty in his heart. However, he firmly believed that Tang Xiu was just lucky in these 2 matches. However, he did not even use his real gambling skills. The surrounding onlookers began to discuss among themselves. Amazing. It's only been a few minutes, right? That unknown young man had actually won a total of 165 million. This speed is much faster than all the money printing machines in the world running at the same time. There will be talents in every generation, and they will lead the way for decades. Yi Taifu's reputation in the professional gambling world could be said to have spread far and wide. But now, he actually lost twice to an unknown young man. The younger generation will surpass the older in time. No wonder so many people like to gamble. The speed of making money is really fast. Even I can't help but want to play a few rounds. I thought there wouldn't be a good show today. But now I realize that I was wrong. I really hope that young man can show off his skills and create a miracle. His luck is really good. Moreover, this young man's courage is really boundless. He didn't even look at his cards and directly threw out 80 million. Admirable. Those who achieve great things must have great courage. Today I have seen it for myself. Jia Ruidao beside Tan Xiao was ecstatic. Jia Ruidao's 3 apprentices were also ecstatic. Even Miao Wintong in the crowd had a whole new level of respect for Tan Xiao. Chu Yi and Bai Tao, who were in the crowd, were even more interested in Tang Xiao. Among the crowd, there was only one person who had little interest in Tan Xiao. And that was the owner of the Paradise Club, Ouyang Lulu. She only thought that Tan Xiao's luck was good in the first 2 rounds. The third round, the dealer shuffled the cards. After the cards were dealt, she looked at Tan Xiao and said, "Mr. Tang, you won the last round. Please speak first." Tan Xiao's divine sense had clearly observed the cards on both sides. He found that his 3 cards were Jack of Spades, 8 of Hearts and 2 of Hearts. Yi Taifu's 3 cards were King of Hearts, 9 of Clubs and 5 of Clubs. His cards were not as big as Yi Taifu's. 10 million. Tan Xiao directly pushed out 10 million chips and calmly said. Yi Taifu didn't choose to hide his cards this time, but directly picked them up. When he saw his cards, he secretly shook his head. He threw the cards and said, "I'm not calling." Tan Xiao faintly smiled as he looked at the dealer, who pushed the chips to him and said, "You've let me win 3 times. I hope you won't let me win again next time." Yi Taifu coldly snorted and said, "Rest assured I'll make you leave crying." Tan Xiao said without being salty nor light, "Don't talk big until the end." The 4th round, the dealer shuffled the cards and dealt them. Then he said, "Mr. Tang, you won the last round. Please speak first." Tan Xiao had already seen the cards on both sides through his divine sense. He immediately laughed in his heart. He directly pushed out 10 million chips and said, 10 million. Yi Taifu was silent for a moment. He also chose to hide his cards and followed with 10 million chips. Tan Xiao still didn't look at his cards and pushed out 50 million chips. Yi Taifu stared blankly for a moment. Suddenly, a bad premonition arose in his heart. However, he firmly believed in his gambling skills. Even if the dealer gave him a small hand, he still had a way to turn defeat into victory. Therefore, he directly pushed out 50 million chips and lightly said, "I'm calling." Tan Xiao directly pushed out all the chips in front of him at once. He lightly smiled and said, "I have a total of 222 million chips. I'm calling all of them. If you can win this round, I'll immediately leave. If you lose, your arrogant words are the same as slapping your own face. Continue or end, I'll give you the choice." Yi Taifu's eyelids twitched. The bad premonition in his heart was getting more and more intense. Tan Xiao pushed out all the chips, indicating that he followed with 161 million. If he followed, he would have to pay the same amount. Moreover, this was the case after he chose to hide his cards. If he looked at his cards and lost, he would have to double the amount. What should I do? Should I look or not? Follow or not? Yi Taifu pondered for a moment and finally decided to look at his cards. Ace of diamonds, 8 of diamonds, 5 of diamonds. Golden flower? Moreover, it's ace gold? A trace of a smile outlined on the corner of Yi Taifu's mouth. He directly counted 322 million chips and said with a faint smile, "I'm calling. Open your cards." Tan Xiao secretly laughed inside. His fingers flicked, and the second card of the 3 cards instantly shot toward the stack of cards in front of the dealer. Almost in a flash, the card in the stack shot toward the card in front of him at a strange angle. As for the card he ejected, it remained in the stack of cards. The cards were exchanged at an extremely fast speed. It was so fast that the naked eye simply couldn't capture their trajectory. Even professional gamblers like Yi Taifu and Jia Ruidao who had extremely sharp eyesight, couldn't detect it. However, among the people present, there was someone who noticed it. It was the cultivator Miao Wentong. In the situation where no one was aware of it, a faint smile appeared on Miao Wentong's face. 3 aces. Tan Xiao opened his cards and said with a faint smile. He was very clear that Yi Taifu had lost. Moreover, he didn't even have the chance to cheat. Impossible. Yi Taifu suddenly jumped up from his chair when he saw the 3 cards that Tan Xiao opened. His eyes were as big as a brass bell, and an unbelievable light burst out from his eyes. He had calculated thousands of times, and was even prepared to cheat. But he never thought that Tan Xiao's cards would turn out to be 3 aces. How to change? Change to the lowest card 2, 3, and 5? Apart from these 3 cards, there were no other 3 cards that could win against Tan Xiao. But he didn't prepare the lowest card 2, 3, and 5. Tan Xiao looked at Yi Taifu, who had lost his composure, and lightly said, "Maybe you still have a chance to win. Show me your cards." Yi Taifu's face was ashen. He absent-mindedly turned his head to look at Chen Kai and said with difficulty, "I'm sorry I lost. I'm powerless to reverse the situation." Powerless to reverse the situation. These words were like a heavy hammer that fiercely pounded on Chen Kai's heart. One must know that Yi Taifu had lost 333 million in this round. Coupled with the 166 million he had lost before, he had lost a total of 499 million. He had taken out 500 million this time. But Yi Taifu had only won 4 rounds, and he only had 1 million left. This result was hard for him to accept. The surrounding crowd suddenly boiled up. Countless people looked at Tan Xiao with disbelief. They could feel their heartbeat speeding up. The sound of discussion was much louder than before. Too awesome! He won 4 rounds in a row, and directly won the opponent's money, leaving only 1 million. This heaven-defying means is simply amazing. God of gamblers! Yi Taifu is already powerful enough, but this young man directly crushed him to death. It seems that after tonight, this young man named Tan Xiao will surely be famous in the gambling world. He's simply my idol. 4 rounds and winning nearly 500 million. This should be the craziest gambling house in recent years, right? This Tan Xiao is really unfathomable. Yi Taifu has lost his face today. He was so arrogant before, but now his face has been ruthlessly slapped. I suddenly remembered a saying, "The higher you stand, the harder you fall." In the Yangtze River, the new waves push the old waves, and the old waves die on the beach. Yi Taifu sat back on the chair in a daze and painfully closed his eyes. He was once the winner praised by countless people, but today, he had fallen from the high clouds, smashing his body into pieces. He was finished. He knew that he was finished. He knew that his reputation would plummet in the future. Even if he returned to the casino in Macau, the treatment he would get would plummet. In the crowd, Chu Yi and Bai Tao looked at each other in dismay. They were sure that Yi Taifu absolutely did not throw the game, because Chen Kai did not have the courage to give away 500 million to Tan Xiao. But Tan Xiao won so easily. Moreover, he won 4 rounds in a row, and won so beautifully. Who was Yi Taifu? Even if they did not like gambling, they had heard of Yi Taifu's great name. Chapter 91. In the crowd, Chu Yi's eyes swept over Tan Xiao with a bit of admiration as he whispered, "Jing Yu is right. This Tan Xiao is absolutely unfathomable." Bai Tao heavily nodded, and said with a face full of approval, "That's right. I also have the same feeling now. Besides, I found that he can cause a sensation no matter where he goes. It was like that in the Everlasting Feast Hall, and it's the same here. It seems that we have to find an opportunity to get to know him." Chu Yi's mind was outstanding. After being silent for a moment, he whispered, "I think that if we go up and recommend ourselves, he may be too lazy to care about us. If you want to make friends with a person, you must observe his face, observe his mood, and then cater to his interest. All right, let's send someone to investigate him and see what he needs." "All right," Bai Tao agreed. Ouyang Lulu, who was in front of them, had an inconceivable expression on her face as she looked at the winner of Tan Xiao. Suddenly, she recalled something and immediately turned to look at Chu Yi and Bai Tao behind her, asking, I suddenly remembered that you once told me about a young man. His name is the same as this Tan Xiao who participated in the gambling. Bai Tao forced a smile and said, It's more than the same name. It's the same person. What? Ouyang Lulu was stunned. She never thought that the Tan Xiao in front of her was the young man that Bai Tao and Chu Yi praised endlessly. He was the one who made the gold medal manager Kong Xia to personally rush to Star City from the imperial capital. He was also the one that even Jingyu worshipped. Who was he? How could he be so powerful? Ouyang Lulu suddenly realized that this young man, who seemed to be a bit handsome, was unexpectedly full of mysterious aura. It was as if he was shrouded in a layer of fog that she couldn't see through. How about it? Do you still want to play? Tan Xiao looked at the dealer pushing all the chips in front of him. He immediately looked at Yi Taifu with a faint smile and said, Play. The fierce voice was not from Yi Taifu's mouth, but from Chen Kai's angry face. Tan Xiao shrugged his shoulders and said in a relaxed manner, But you don't have any money. 1,000,000 chips is only the bottom line. Do you think you can play? Chen Kai took out a jade pendant carved with a coiling dragon and phoenix pattern, and shouted in a deep voice, Having no money doesn't mean you don't have the qualifications to continue gambling. This jade pendant belonged to Jiaorui Dao. The next round of gambling would be decided in a single round. If you lose, give me all the chips in front of you. If you win, I'll return this jade pendant to you. Tan Xiao looked at Jiaorui Dao. He was keenly aware that the moment Chen Kai took out the jade pendant, Jiaorui Dao's breathing became rapid, and his eyes became incomparably fervent. What's your decision? Tan Xiao looked at Jiaorui Dao and asked. Jiaorui Dao struggled for a long time in his heart. Finally, he clenched his teeth and made up his mind. Let's bet. Tan Xiao nodded lightly. He looked at Chen Kai and said, Then I'll play with you again. After this round, no matter who wins or loses, the grudges between us will be written off. What do you think? I agree. Chen Kai knew that Tan Xiao had an extraordinary origin and was also a cultivator. Even if Tan Xiao didn't say it, he didn't dare to provoke Tan Xiao. Therefore, his answer was very straightforward. Tan Xiao looked at the dealer, nodded and asked, What kind of gambling tools are we going to use? Yi Taifu, in order to adjust his mentality and regain his confidence, said with a sinking tone, You were the winner before, so I give you the choice. With a strange expression, Tan Xiao asked, Are you sure about this? Yi Taifu confidently said, Yes. Tan Xiao looked at the dealer and lightly said, I'll have to trouble you to get a new deck of playing cards. The dealer nodded and took out a new deck of playing cards. He handed it to Tan Xiao and asked, How do you want to play? Tan Xiao looked at Yi Taifu and lightly said, Gambling skills are nothing more than eyesight, hearing, and hand speed. Today, we'll learn from the god of gamblers from the TV. Let the dealer scatter the new deck of cards in the air. We'll act at the same time. Each of us will grab a card and compare the cards. In this deck of cards, the biggest is the king, and the smallest is the ace. How about it? Yi Taifu was startled. He didn't expect that Tan Xiao wouldn't play according to common sense, and would even choose this kind of gambling method. One must know that his hand speed was very fast. Needless to say, his eyesight was as sharp as an eagle's. I agree. Tan Xiao nodded and said, Then get ready. Let's begin. The dealer looked at Tan Xiao and Yi Taifu and immediately said, Both of you, please come with me to the open space. I'll ask someone to draw 3 lines with the same distance on this open space. Each of us will stand on the line, and I'll scatter the cards. You two will grab each other's cards. Whoever grabs the biggest card will be the winner. Good. I agree. Tan Xiao and Yi Taifu nodded at the same time. In the crowd, Chen Kai was still immersed in anger. When he heard Tan Xiao and Yi Taifu's gambling method, his heart was a bit irritated. He felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't tell what was wrong. He could only stare at Jiaorui Dao and his disciple with an unkind expression. Isn't this just looking for abuse? In another direction, Miao Wentong didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at Yi Taifu. His heart was full of sympathy. He didn't know about others, but he knew that Tan Xiao was an expert who could break through the 1000 revolution array's 6th layer. His strength was absolutely formidable. Whether it was his eyesight or his hand speed, Both were fast to the extreme. A few minutes later, the dealer stood in the middle, while Tan Xiao and Yi Taifu stood on both sides. She looked at the two of them and said, "Both of you, I'm ready. I hope you can cheer up and win this crucial gambling game. Now, I'll start counting down from 3. After counting, I'll scatter this deck of cards in the air." 3, 2, 1, 0. The dealer swung her arm and used all of her strength to scatter the cards in her hand above her head. Humph! Before the dealer scattered the cards, Tan Xiao's divine sense had firmly locked on the king card in the deck. After the cards were scattered, he moved lightning fast. The king card had not yet risen to the top, but he had already rushed up. Almost in a flash, the king card was already in his hand, and his feet once again landed on the ground. On the other side, Yi Taifu's movements were a few beats slower than Tan Xiao's. His eyes quickly turned, looking for the position of the king card. Seeing Tan Xiao taking the initiative, his complexion abruptly changed. He hesitated for a moment because he didn't see the king card, but the little king card. Then he flew up and snatched the little king card into his hand. His eyes continued to sweep across the cards that filled the sky. 10 seconds later, the rest of the deck of cards fell to the ground. Some were facing up, some were facing up. The dealer came back to the middle of the two and said with a smile, "Both of you have grabbed the cards you want. Now, I hope that both of you will show your cards at the same time." Yi Taifu didn't find the king card. Among all the cards facing up on the ground, there was no king card. His heart was a bit perturbed. Looking at the expressionless face of Tan Xiao, he secretly prayed in his heart, hoping that Tan Xiao wouldn't grab the king card. Otherwise, he would really suffer a crushing defeat. Little king! Little king! Both of them showed their cards at the same time. In a split second, Yi Taifu's heart felt like it had fallen into an ice cave. His body turned stiff like a stone. In his eyes, there was no longer perturbed, but intense disbelief and pain. In this last round of gambling, he seemed to have grasped a life-saving straw. But after he grasped it, he found that this straw not only couldn't help him, but also fiercely slapped him. What was adding fuel to the fire? What was adding fuel to the fire? This last round happened to be the perfect interpretation. Wow! The atmosphere of the scene was ignited in an instant. Everyone's eyes were brimming with fiery passion. Their target was Tan Xiao, not Yi Taifu. Eyesight and hand speed. This was the most basic and most important ability of a gambling expert. But now, Tan Xiao didn't have any chance to use any tricks. He could only rely on his own ability to win the gambling game. This made many people think that Tan Xiao's previous win was entirely due to luck. But now their thinking had completely changed. In a fight between experts, luck played a part, but gambling skills were more important. It was said that 9 out of 10 gambles were lost, because 8 out of 10 gambles were cheating. There was a bit of sympathy in the dealer's eyes. She quickly looked at Yi Taifu and said, "Mr. Tang has grabbed the king card, and Mr. Yi has grabbed the little king card. I declare that Mr. Tang is the winner of this gambling game." Puff! Yi Taifu was furious. Under the huge blow, his mouth spurted out a mouthful of blood. As his vision darkened, his body stiffened and fell backward. Trash! Chen Kai's complexion was ashen. He was like a mad wild dog, looking at Yi Taifu who fell in front of him. Not only he didn't have any sympathy, but he also ran a few steps and fiercely kicked Yi Taifu. In this gambling game, not only did he lose all the money he won from Jiaorui Dao, but he also lost all his capital. How could he not be angry? However, his action made everyone's complexion stagnant. Their hearts were filled with disbelief. Quite a number of people even showed anger, and began to discuss in low voices. Isn't this Chen Kai too shameless? He can't afford to lose? Although Yi Taifu had lost today, and lost miserably, but he had helped him win a lot of money before. Now that he lost, he treats him like this? Chen Kai's character is too bad, right? His Chen family's old face has been thrown away by him. He can be used in front of others, but not in the back. Simply shameless enough to make one's hair stand on end. I've decided to immediately terminate the business with the Chen family. With this kind of character, I think the rest of the Chen family is also not so good. It's really a pity for Yi Taifu, a gambling expert of his generation, To fall into such a miserable end. I really want to beat Chen Kai up. He's a famous person in Jingmen Island, but he doesn't even have the slightest demeanor. I'm really drunk on him. Our Jingmen Island's face has been thrown away by this Chen Kai guy. Losing is losing. He can pick it up and let it go. Why does he need to make such a contemptible move? It's really outrageous. Shameless. Chapter 92. At this moment, Chu Yi and Bai Tao looked at Chen Kai with contempt. They secretly regretted coming to Jingmen Island to wade into these muddy waters. Seeing that the gambling game was over, the two of them quietly left. As the owner of the Paradise Club, Ouyang Lulu didn't stay for long. Her contemptuous eyes lingered on Chen Kai for a moment before her eyes stopped on Tan Xiao. She looked at Tan Xiao deeply, and then chased after Chu Yi and Bai Tao. She wanted to know more about Tan Xiao from Chu Yi and Bai Tao. She wanted to know more about Tan Xiao, who she couldn't understand. At this moment, Jia Ruidao received the only relic of his deceased wife, the exquisite jade pendant carved with a coiling dragon and phoenix. His eyes were filled with sparkling tears. Originally, he thought that his life was over. Not only did he lose all his assets, but he also owed huge debts outside. He even lost the last relic of his deceased wife. However, Tan Xiao's victory made him feel as if he had returned to heaven from hell. Brother Tang, thank you, thank you. Jia Ruidao's tone was somewhat whimpering, but every word he said was filled with deep sincerity. Tan Xiao couldn't stand others being deeply grateful to him, nor was he used to people communicating with him in this way. He indifferently shook his head and said, "Prepare to go back to the hotel. Also, if possible, it's best if you can help me book a flight ticket for tonight or tomorrow. I'm going back to Star City." Jia Ruidao quickly said, "Brother Tang, Xiaolong said that he helped you apply for a week's vacation. It's only 2 days now, so you don't need to rush back. On one hand, I want to exchange my winnings and deposit them into your account. On the other hand, I also want to express my gratitude and take you to have fun in Jingmen Island. You don't know, but there are many fun places in Jingmen Island. I'm sure you'll like some of them." This, Tan Xiao hesitated. He wasn't interested in the fun places in Jingmen Island. His biggest interest was that huge sum of money. According to the agreement between him and Jia Ruidao, he could get half of the nearly 500 million he won. Upon seeing Tan Xiao's hesitation, Gong Dalong quickly said, "Grandmaster Tang, my master is right. We need to convert the chips into money and transfer the money to our accounts. This will take some time. Moreover, I know of a private villa that not only has a beautiful environment, but also has precious wild meat. A few days ago, I heard that the manor hired dozens of martial arts experts to enter a nearby island and hunt a sea flood dragon that had become a spirit. This was the second time in the 10 years since the establishment of the villa that they had obtained a sea serpent. For the first time, many people ate sea serpent meat. I heard that the taste was simply the best in the world. A sea serpent that had become a spirit? Tan Xiao's eyes lit up, and he was instantly tempted. For his current cultivation, he needed materials from various parts of a fierce beast's body, such as hair, flesh, bones, claws, and so on. These were the most basic materials for refining the body-tempering liquid. In addition, if he encountered a higher-level ferocious beast, he could also refine a higher-level medicine, such as the Golden Bell liquid, which was most suitable for the skin-strengthening stage. "What's the name of the villa?" Tan Xiao asked. "Seaside Straight Manor," said Gong Dalong with a smile. "When are we going there?" Tan Xiao asked again. "If you have time, we can go there immediately after our ship docks tomorrow," said Gong Dalong quickly. "Then I'll stay in Jingmen Island for 2 more days." Tan Xiao nodded and said, "But I need to rest well on the liner, and I don't want anyone to disturb me." Gong Dalong respectfully said, "Don't worry. We won't let anyone disturb you. Also, you need to tell me your bank account number. I'll transfer the money to your account after the chips are converted into money." "All right." Tan Xiao sent his bank account number to Gong Dalong via his mobile phone, and then left the VIP private room under the watchful eyes of many people. However, he didn't go back to his room, but went to the stern deck where there were few guests. overlooking the turbulent sea and feeling the cool breeze. A comfortable feeling spontaneously arose in his heart. Recently, he had always been busy running around for all kinds of things. He rarely had free time to think about what to do next. Moreover, he didn't like the fact that there seemed to be a pair of invisible hands pulling him forward. There were a lot of things that he couldn't control. If I can return to my peak, the heavenly Tao of this world will be nothing but a fart. The coldness in Tan Xiu's eyes faded away, as he felt somewhat helpless inside. It's very quiet here. An abrupt voice sounded behind Tan Xiu. Tan Xiu turned his head, and found that it turned out to be the owner of the Paradise Club, Ouyang Lulu. Looking at the girl who was only a few years older than him, with a smile on her face, Tan Xiu said indifferently, "Indeed, it's good." Ouyang Lulu looked at Tan Xiu and said with a smile, "Congratulations on winning the bet." Tan Xiu shook his head and didn't speak again. He didn't want to be disturbed at the moment, but Ouyang Lulu came over, which made him feel somewhat helpless inside. If it wasn't because of Ouyang Lulu's identity, he really wanted to drive her away immediately. "You don't welcome me?" Ouyang Lulu, who had an exquisite heart, was keenly aware of Tan Xiu's attitude and immediately asked. "I just want to be alone for a while," Tan Xiu said indifferently. Ouyang Lulu was annoyed. Ever since she was a child, she had encountered countless men who threw themselves at her wave after wave. Even if those men pretended to reject her, but in their hearts, they couldn't wait to take her as their own. However, the feeling she got from Tan Xiu was that he really didn't want her to be here. It was as if he didn't have the slightest interest in her. "Hey, are you still a man or not?" Ouyang Lulu was annoyed and said something very rashly. However, after saying that, she realized that she had lost control of herself and secretly regretted it. Tan Xiu looked at Ouyang Lulu with an indifferent expression and said indifferently, "Do you really want to try whether I'm a man or not? I don't mind having a one-night stand without any responsibility." "You." Ouyang Lulu was furious. Looking at Tan Xiu's indifferent face, she almost wanted to lift her foot and fiercely kick Tan Xiu's face. However, realizing her own combat prowess, she took a deep breath and turned to leave. A few hours later, Tan Xiu, who had returned to his room, received a text message on his mobile. His bank account had received a sum of 250 million yuan. It seems that Jiarui Dao and his disciple keep their promise. This huge sum of money didn't have the slightest ripple in Tan Xiu's heart. For him, money was only an auxiliary for his cultivation. If he didn't need money to buy a lot of things, he really didn't care whether he had money or not. Even if it was a mountain of gold and silver, he wouldn't even glance at it. Paradise Club. Inside the general manager's office, Ouyang Lulu angrily sat on the boss's chair and smashed the teacup under her feet. Never in her wildest dreams did she think that after she found Tan Xiu's trace through the surveillance video, she would unexpectedly be ignored by the opposite party. He was so young, yet he actually thought of such a disgusting thing. You may know a person's face, but you don't know his heart. Men are really nothing good. Ouyang Lulu secretly muttered in her heart. Knock knock, the door was knocked. Come in. Ouyang Lulu quickly adjusted her mood and said. The door was pushed open as Chu Yi and Bai Tao came into the office with a beaming smile. They casually sat on the sofa in the corner of the office. Looking at Ouyang Lulu personally pouring tea for them, Bai Tao asked with a smile. Old classmate, you've learned something new today, right? We've said before that Tan Xiu is absolutely unfathomable, but I didn't expect that he would win so easily in today's bet. While making tea, Ouyang Lulu lightly said, he does have some ability, but he's too arrogant and rude. I don't like this kind of person. Chewy grinned and said, I say, great beauty Lulu, it doesn't matter if you like him or not. I'm afraid there are a lot of women who like him. Didn't you notice that many young and beautiful women who were watching the bet today looked at Tan Xiu with eyes full of hot feelings? Ouyang Lulu coldly snorted and said, Can those women be compared with me? Chewy stared blankly for a moment before he couldn't help laughing and said, You're right. If you're a fresh flower, then they're just green foxtail grass. There's no way for you to be compared. However, listening to your tone, it seems that you've met with Tan Xiu alone? Ouyang Lulu snappily said. I've indeed met him. But I was blasted back by that bastard. I just found that you men are really shameless. That Tan Xiao is the epitome of shamelessness. Chu Yi and Bai Tao looked at each other in dismay. A strong interest rose in their hearts at the same time. Old classmate, what did Tan Xiao do to you? Bai Tao curiously asked. Yeah, that Tan Xiao wouldn't be so daring as to do anything to you. Would he? Chu Yi hurriedly asked. Ouyang Lulu rolled her eyes at them and snappily said, he dares. Subsequently, she narrated the whole story of her meeting with Tan Xiao from beginning to end. Finally, she indignantly said, tell me, is he still a man? This great ant is as beautiful as a flower, a national beauty. Other men are eager to get close to me. But that Tan Xiao unexpectedly dared to drive this great ant back. It's really preposterous. If I had some martial arts, I would have taught him a lesson at that time. Don't. Bai Tao quickly said. Chu Yi also quickly said. I say, old classmate, teaching Tan Xiao a lesson is something you can only think about in your heart. Don't really take action. You don't know that Tan Xiao is very powerful. Looking at their panicked reaction, Ouyang Lulu was confused and asked, what's wrong with you? Even if that Tan Xiao is powerful, he only has 2 arms and 2 legs. Is it possible that he has 3 heads and 6 arms? Chu Yi forced a smile and said, I'm afraid that Tan Xiao is more powerful than having 3 heads and 6 arms. You're the local bully of Jingmen Island, so you should have heard of the Everlasting Feast Hall, right? Of course I know. I've also met the little boss of the Everlasting Feast Hall. We've had a meal together, drank wine and chatted. Why do you ask? Ouyang Lulu said. Chapter 93. Chu Yi looked deeply at Ouyang Lulu and said in a deep voice, old classmate, your Ouyang family should be one of the best in Jingmen Island in terms of strength, and your intelligence network should be unparalleled. I think you should have heard about what happened in the Everlasting Feast Hall last night, right? Of course I have. What do you mean? Ouyang Lulu was surprised. Chu Yi said, last night, 3 experts tried to break through the 1,000 revolution array in the Everlasting Feast Hall. One of them was Tan Xiao, and he's the one who broke through the 6th layer of the 1,000 revolution array. What? Ouyang Lulu abruptly stood up. The teacup in her hand fell midair, spilling the tea inside. The Everlasting Feast Hall was located in Jingmen Island. She and the restaurant's little boss, Gu Xiaoxue, were friends for nearly 10 years. Although their relationship was not as close as bosom friends, it could be said that they appreciated each other. She knew about the 1,000 revolution array, and she also knew that only powerful cultivators could break through it. If it was an ordinary person, they would most likely lose their life inside. A cultivator? Tan Xiao is a cultivator? Ouyang Lulu was shocked like a tidal wave. The news caught her unprepared. Of course, what shocked her the most was not only Tan Xiao's identity as a cultivator, but also the fact that Tan Xiao actually broke through the 6th layer of the 1,000 revolution array. The 6th layer? How terrifying was his strength to be able to do that? It seemed that no one had been able to break through the 6th layer of the 1,000 revolution array for decades. Looking at the shocked Ouyang Lulu, Chu Yi forced a smile and said, old classmate, now you should understand why I stopped you, right? I can't see through that guy, but I'm sure that he's very powerful. So powerful that it makes one's hair stand on end. So don't provoke him. This kind of person can only be a friend, not an enemy. Ouyang Lulu's sensual red lips squirmed a few times. Finally, she forced a smile and said, you're right. If we really provoke such a fearful expert, let alone me, I'm afraid our entire Ouyang family won't be able to withstand it. More than 20 years ago, there was a big family in the northwest. Because one of their clansmen provoked a terrifying expert, the whole family was killed overnight. Chu Yi said in surprise, you even know this kind of thing? Wasn't this matter suppressed by the country's bigwigs and not leaked out? Ouyang Lulu whispered. My granduncle was the one who handled this matter in the past. Your granduncle is that big shot? Chu Yi and Bai Tao exclaimed in unison. Ouyang Lulu waved her hand and said, what are you thinking? What was that big shot's surname? What's our last name? What I mean is that the boss sent my granduncle to take care of the funeral. I see. Chu Yi and Bai Tao suddenly understood. Ouyang Lulu said. I really don't understand how Jia Ruidao knows such a powerful person. That Tan Xiao is already so powerful at such a young age. How terrifying must the cultivation of his seniors be? Sect elders? Cultivation? Chu Yi and Bai Tao looked at Ouyang Lulu with puzzlement. Ouyang Lulu rolled her eyes at the two and said, Haven't you realized that Tan Xiao is a cultivator? Don't tell me that with your family background and information channels, you don't know the existence of cultivators in this world. Chu Yi and Bai Tao were directly petrified. Cultivators. They had heard of such people, but they had never seen one before. Regarding such legendary figures, they had always thought that it was a blessing to meet them, and that it was normal to not meet them. But at this moment, Ouyang Lulu said that Tan Xiao was a cultivator, and it set off a monstrous wave in their hearts. However, the two of them carefully thought about it. The more they thought about it, the more they felt that Ouyang Lulu was right. Tan Xiao was so powerful. If he was not a cultivator, how could a normal person do such a heaven-defying thing? This won't do. We must immediately find someone to investigate Tan Xiao and see what he needs. If we can't make friends with him while he's young, then once he grows up, I'm afraid it will be extremely difficult for us to make friends with him again. Chui spoke with a resolute and decisive tone. Bai Tao also nodded and said, I'll immediately send the news back to the family. Even if we have to use the entire family's connections, we must find out what Tan Xiao likes and dislikes. Even if we can't become Tan Xiao's real friend, we still have to think of a way to make him owe us a big favor. Right. Chui nodded heavily. Ouyang Lulu looked at the two's solemn expression as her mind raced. After she had guessed Tan Xiao's true identity, how could she not have the same idea? After a night of drifting, the luxury liner finally docked at Jingmen Island's port at noon the next day. As the guests left, Tan Xiao and Jia Ruidao, master and disciple, leisurely left the liner. When it was almost lunchtime, the five of them didn't stop and drove to the seaside Strait Manor. When they were at sea, Gong Dalong had called and booked a private box, so the five of them decided to have lunch at the seaside Strait Manor, Jingmen Island's west coast, in a majestic and large-scale villa district. This was the location of the seaside Strait Manor. 2 cars arrived at the entrance and were strictly inspected before they were allowed to pass. What made Tan Xiao surprised was that there were a lot of security personnel in the manor. Patrols could be seen everywhere, and each and every one of these security personnel had a strong build and steady footsteps. It was obvious that they were martial artists. What's the origin of this seaside Strait Manor? Tan Xiao, who was sitting in the back seat, looked at Jia Ruidao in the front passenger seat and asked. Jia Ruidao said, I don't know the specific origin. However, I know that the owner of the seaside Strait Manor is from the imperial capital. He has been operating here for more than 20 years and has a huge influence. However, in recent years, because the owner of the seaside Strait Manor is old and his health is not very good, his son Tang Dong is in charge of the overall situation of the manor. Tan Xiao nodded and said with great interest, I'd like to meet the old owner of the manor. Maybe we can talk about some common topics. Jia Ruidao couldn't help laughing and said, Brother Tang, I'm afraid it's not easy to meet the old owner of the manor. I don't know how many dignitaries in the entire Jingmen Island want to visit him, but all of them are rejected at the door. I once heard that a big shot in Jingmen Island, who wants to meet the old owner of the manor, has to make an appointment for half a month in advance, only to get the opportunity to receive him for half an hour. He's so arrogant. Tan Xiao was surprised. Jia Ruidao said with a smile, It's not that he's arrogant, but his background is big enough so he's very unyielding. In fact, I can guess his origin, but I'm not 100% sure. Tan Xiao asked doubtfully, Tell me about your guess. Jia Ruidao said, He's surnamed Tang, and there's only one big family surnamed Tang in the imperial capital. Tan Xiao said, Is this big family in the imperial capital very powerful? Jia Ruidao replied without hesitation, It's more than powerful, it's terrifying. In the entire country, there are no more than 5 big families that are more powerful than the Tang family. Think about it. In a dignified country, with a population of 1.4 to 1.5 billion, There are no more than 5 families that are more powerful than the Tang family. How strong is this Tang family? Yes, it's indeed very strong. Tan Xiao nodded and said. After entering the manor, 2 cars stopped in the spacious parking lot. Immediately, 4 middle-aged men in suits strode forward and quickly opened the door for everyone. Welcome. A middle-aged man wearing glasses seemed to have been waiting here for a long time. His eyes flashed and said with a smile. Jia Ruidao was surprised. Chief Hu? Why did you come personally? Hu Xingyu said with a smile. I heard Grandmaster Jia has returned triumphantly from the Paradise Club, so I naturally came out to greet you. Moreover, I also came to pay my respects to that powerful gambling Grandmaster. Jia Ruidao smiled and introduced. Chief Hu, you got the news really fast. Let me introduce you. This is Brother Tang who helped me win the bet, Tan Xiao. Brother Tang, this is the receptionist of the Seaside Straight Manor, Hu Xingyu. Hu Xingyu looked at Tan Xiao. Although he had long received the news that Tan Xiao was young, he never thought that he would be this young. With a bright smile on his face, he quickly extended his hand to greet. Welcome, Mr. Tang. I've heard about your casino yesterday. If the Paradise Club wasn't at sea, I would have immediately rushed over to learn from you. You're welcome. Tan Xiao didn't like to socialize, but he didn't want to slap a smiling face. Since someone had warmly welcomed him, he didn't want to give them a face. Hu Xingyu said with a smile. Everyone, please come with me. Your box has been reserved and the food is also being prepared. You can have your meal soon. Soon, under Hu Xingyu's lead, everyone came to a luxurious European-style villa. After understanding it, Tan Xiao understood that each villa in the Seaside Straight Manor would only entertain a group of guests. Please wait a moment. I'll immediately order the kitchen to serve the dishes. Wait. Tan Xiao opened his mouth to stop Hu Xingyu. Mr. Tang, what can I do for you? Hu Xingyu asked. Tan Xiao said, I want to see the old master of your Seaside Straight Manor. I don't know if you can introduce me? This. Hu Xingyu hesitated for a moment. After a moment, he forced a smile and said, Mr. Tang, our old master is old and doesn't care about worldly affairs in recent years. So, I'm afraid I can't do anything about it. Tan Xiao was silent for a moment and then said, Since I can't see your old master, it shouldn't be a problem for me to see the current manager, Tang Dong. Right? I just have a few questions to ask him. Hu Xingyu said, I'll convey your request to my boss. If he wants to see you, I'll inform you at that time. All right, Tan Xiao said. At this moment, a loud voice came from outside the villa. A few seconds later, a figure appeared at the door of the villa's hall. Boundless heavenly venerable, this poor Taoist came uninvited. I hope you can forgive me. Chapter 94. The newcomer was a sage-like old Taoist. He wore a Taoist robe and had his hair combed into a bun. He held a horsetail whisk in his hand and wore cloud boots on his feet. There was a faint smile on his thin face. You are? As the reception manager of the villa, Hu Xingyu immediately stood up and asked when he saw the old Taoist who had taken the liberty to visit. After all, if Jia Ruidao, Tan Xiao, and the others didn't want to see this old Taoist, then he would be responsible for driving this old Taoist out. The old Taoist scanned the others with a scrutinizing gaze and finally stopped on Tan Xiao. With a smile he said, This old Taoist hails from the Xiang Temple in the northwest. My Taoist title is Tao Master Zi. I was invited by someone to Jingmen Island as a guest, and I inadvertently heard about what happened in the Everlasting Feast Hall yesterday, so I came to visit Benefactor Tang. Jia Ruidao asked with a sinking tone. How did you know that Brother Tang is here? Tao Master Zi said with a smile. Presumably, you are Benefactor Jia, right? Someone recognized you just now and said that you were with almsgiver Tang yesterday. Therefore, this humble Taoist deduced that this is almsgiver Tang. I'm Tan Xiao. Tan Xiao nodded. What business do you have with me? Tao Master Zi said with a smile. This poor Taoist wants to invite Benefactor Tang to cooperate with me to break into the Evil Dragon Sea area. I wonder if Benefactor Tang is interested? Evil Dragon Sea area? Tan Xiao had never heard of this name before. He immediately asked, Where is the Evil Dragon Sea area? Why do you want to barge into the Evil Dragon Sea region? Dao Master Z was surprised. Benefactor Tang doesn't know about the Evil Dragon Sea area? I don't know. Tan Xiao shook his head. Dao Master Z said, the Evil Dragon Sea area is thousands of miles away from Jingmen Island. It's a small channel in the South China Sea. As our Purple Sun Temple is best at refining artifacts, this penniless priest plans to collect some materials from ferocious beasts and a special ore. This penniless priest plans to hunt some ferocious beasts. However, this humble Taoist knows that his strength is meager. If he were to go alone, it would be very difficult for him to escape unscathed. Therefore, I heard that Benefactor Tang's cultivation is extremely high, so I wanted to invite you to go with me. Evil Dragon Sea area? Kill berserk beasts? Looking for special ores? Tan Xiao was shocked and immediately asked, when are we leaving? Is it really just the two of us? Dao Master Z said with a smile. It seems Benefactor Tang has agreed. That's right, just the two of us. This poor Taoist would like to invite a few more people. But this poor Taoist has very few connections. Moreover, this poor Taoist is on Jingmen Island, so there is no way for me to invite people of the same Tao. Tan Xiao was silent for a moment. Two faces appeared in his mind. They were Xiao Mingjin and Miao Wentong. He was considering whether he should invite the two of them along. Others might not know about him, but he was well aware of it. Currently, he only had the strength of the first layer of Star's tyrannical body, at the peak of Qi refining realm. If he were to fight with experts like Xiao Mingjin and Miao Wentong, perhaps he would be killed in an instant. One more helper meant one more chance of survival. Tan Xiao made a decision in his heart and said, since Dao Master Z can't invite others, then I'll invite two people. To be honest, I also need materials from the dire beasts. Once I invite them, we can split our harvest equally between the four of us. How about it? Dao Master Z slightly hesitated before he nodded and said with a smile, then I'll have to trouble Benefactor Tang. Tan Xiao grabbed his mobile and pulled out the business card that Miao Wentong gave him. Then he dialed the phone number on it. At this moment, Miao Wentong and Xiao Mingjin were staying in a 5-star hotel, talking about what happened in the Paradise Club. As Xiao Mingjin listened to Miao Wentong's vivid speech, he secretly regretted that he didn't come to watch the fight. That Yi Taifu's loss is not unjust. Comparing eyesight and speed with a cultivator, he's just asking for trouble. However, Tang Xiao's style of doing things was really hard to fathom. A dignified cultivator unexpectedly ran to help others gamble. What an interesting young man. Xiao Mingjin said with a chuckle. Miao Wentong said with a smile. That's right. A cultivator cultivates his mind and temperament, and strives to improve his cultivation. This is the first time I've come across a cultivator who participated in gambling. However, because of the previous conflict, I apologize to Tan Xiao. If he doesn't forgive me, I can't do anything about it. Xiao Mingjin shook his head and said, I think Tan Xiao isn't a narrow-minded person. Since you've apologized, I think he won't take the previous matter to heart. I hope so, Miao Wentong said with a wry smile. Xiao Mingjin no longer mentioned the topic about Tan Xiao. He changed the topic and said, Brother Miao, the annual Bauhinia auction is tonight. Can you get the tickets? I actually have two purposes in coming to Jingmen Island. The first is to break through the 1000 Revolution Array, and the second is to participate in the Bauhinia auction. Miao Wentong said with a smile. Actually, I also have this purpose. Coincidentally, some friends in the business world in Jingmen Island gave me several tickets yesterday. Let's go together in the evening. However, I have to say something first. This time, I've prepared a lot of money to buy a few things I need. Xiao Mingjin said with a smile. I won't compete with you maliciously, but I'll go all out for the things I need. After all, the annual Bauhinia auction is not a lot of useful things for us cultivators. I understand. Miao Wentong nodded and said, Ring, ring, ring. His cell phone rang, interrupting their chat. Miao Wentong took out his cell phone and looked at the caller ID. It was an unfamiliar number. According to his previous habit, he wanted to directly hang up the call. However, when Tan Xiao's appearance appeared in his mind, He immediately changed his mind. He pressed the answer button and said, "I'm Miao Wentong. Who are you?" "I'm Tan Xiao." Tan Xiao's voice came from the phone. Miao Wentong's pupil shrunk. A happy expression suddenly appeared on his face as he quickly asked, "Mr. Tang, is there something you need from me?" "There is. A Taoist who claims to be Tao Master Z invited me to the Evil Dragon Sea area to hunt fierce beasts. I want to ask if you're interested." Miao Wentong quickly looked at Xiao Mingjin and said with a sinking tone, "I know Tao Master Z. I've known him for more than 20 years. I'm very interested. I wonder if I can bring one more person with me? It just so happens that Xiao Mingjin is also here." "All right," Tan Xiao said. Miao Wentong asked, "When will it be sent out? Where shall we meet?" Tan Xiao said, "If you can come to the Seaside Straight Manor now. After you arrive here, look for Manager Hu Sin Yu. He'll take you there." All right. We'll immediately catch up." The call ended. Miao Wentong repeated Tan Xiao's words and grinned. "Brother Xiao, it seems that Tan Xiao is really a broad-minded person. He invited us to the Evil Dragon Sea area to hunt fierce beasts. I think this is a good opportunity for us to make friends with him." Xiao Mingjin stood up and said with a smile, "It's indeed a heaven-sent opportunity. However, the Evil Dragon Sea area is full of dangers, so we must be very careful. Let's go." "Okay." In the Seaside Straight Manor Villa, Tan Xiao put away his mobile as he looked at Tao Master Z and said, "Let's have a meal together. I believe that the two people I invited will also arrive soon. I don't have much time. Since we've reached an agreement, we'll immediately leave after they arrive." Tao Master Z said with a smile, "I didn't expect that Benefactor Tang would be so swift and decisive. This poor Taoist admires you. Then this poor Taoist will respectfully accept." Jiarui Dao looked at Tao Master Z, and then looked at Tan Xiao. He found that he seemed to have seen a special circle, and he simply couldn't squeeze into this circle. However, he was an extremely tactful person, so he immediately warmly welcomed Tao Master Z to take a seat. The lunch was very sumptuous. It was so sumptuous that even Tan Xiao felt that it was somewhat extravagant. At the same time, his heart was filled with helplessness. For example, the two main dishes were made from good quality fierce beasts' meat. If he were to give these fierce beasts' meat to him, he would definitely be able to use it as the main material to refine the golden bell liquid. What a pity! The spiritual power in the meat has been completely consumed, and it won't be of much benefit to the body. Amidst Tan Xiao's sigh, the lunch was finished. Jiarui Dao wanted to spend more time with Tan Xiao, but he knew that Tan Xiao had something to do later, so he got up and left with his 3 disciples. Tan Xiao didn't urge him to stay. He didn't even say any polite words as he quietly watched Jiarui Dao leave. "Benefactor Tang, this poor Taoist heard that you broke through the 1,000 Revolution Array in the Everlasting Feast Hall. It's really amazing. To tell you the truth, this poor Taoist has also broken through the 1,000 Revolution Array of the Everlasting Feast Hall. But unfortunately, this poor Taoist's cultivation is limited. I could only break through the 3rd layer, and had no choice but to withdraw." Tao Master Z said while holding his horsetail whisk while sitting face to face with Tan Xiao. Tan Xiao shook his head and said, "My cultivation is very low, and my strength is also very weak. However, I know a lot about arrays, so breaking arrays is naturally more powerful than the average cultivators. When we arrive at the Evil Dragon Sea area, I'm afraid I won't be able to help much when it comes to hunting high-level fierce beasts." Tao Master Z was startled. He was silent for a while before he solemnly said, "Benefactor Tang, don't belittle yourself. In my eyes, a formation master is far stronger than a martial cultivator with a powerful cultivation base. When the time comes, Benefactor Tang only needs to arrange the killing array, and we will be responsible for leading the fierce beasts into the array. When the time comes, it will be much easier to hunt them." Tan Xiao thought about it, and understood Tao Master Z's meaning. He nodded and said, "Arranging the array is not a problem, but I need some materials." "What materials?" Tao Master Z asked. Tan Xiao said, "Jades. The better the quality of the jades, the better the array I can arrange. In addition, I also need to engrave some talismans, which will be used when arranging the array. Dao Master Z said with a smile. These are trivial matters. This poor Taoist has a friend in Jingmen Island who runs a jade business. So be it. This poor Taoist will contact him now and ask him to send you the jades you need as soon as possible. As for the talismans, I can only trouble benefactor Tang. No problem. Tan Xiu continued. To engrave the talismans, I need to buy some things. So be it. You wait here for the 2 people I invited. I'll go buy some things. After I come back and engrave the talismans, we'll immediately set off. All right. Chapter 95. Just as Tan Xiu walked out of the villa's hall, a middle-aged man walked into the courtyard. He had a square face, a well-proportioned build, and a pair of bright and spirited eyes. Who are you looking for? I'm looking for Tan Xiu. Tan Xiu raised his brows as he sized him up and said, I'm Tan Xiu. Who are you? I'm Tang Dong. I heard you want to see me? At the same time, Tang Dong was also sizing up Tan Xiu with a puzzled expression. He couldn't understand why this young man, whose fame had spread far and wide in Jingmen Island in the past 2 days, wanted to see him. Tan Xiu nodded and said, That's right. I originally wanted to see the manor's old master, but I heard that it's very difficult to see him, so I wanted to see you. There's something I need to ask you. How about we find a quiet place? Tang Dong looked at the villa behind Tan Xiu, turned around and said, Come with me. There's a villa nearby that specializes in providing tea and drinks. It's generally not open to the public. Quickly, the 2 of them came to the villa. As the waiter brewed the tea, Tang Dong tasted it and looked at Tan Xiu asking, Tell me, what do you want from me? Tan Xiu said, I'm interested in the ingredients you used to make the main dish. I wonder if you can tell me where you hunted fierce beasts? So it turns out to be this matter. In fact, many people know the place where we hunt fierce beasts. There's a trench near Jingmen Island called the Eye of Death. There are some fierce beasts there. Each and every one of them is very fierce, and most of them even have simple spiritual wisdom. Hunting fierce beasts is not easy, is it? Tan Xiu said. Of course it's not easy. Every time we send people to the Eye of Death, some people are injured, and some even died several times. This is also the reason why the food in our seaside strait manor is extremely expensive. With a face full of understanding, Tan Xiu said, I can see that the security personnel of your manor are all martial artists. If you pay a little more attention and use some weapons, you should be able to hunt fierce beasts. Last question. Does your villa have any dire beast corpses for sale? Tang Dong's brows wrinkled as he asked in puzzlement. You need the bodies of fierce beasts? Yes, Tan Xiu said. Tang Dong shook his head and said, Our manor does have some fierce beasts' corpses, but we won't sell them. That's because it's extremely difficult for us to hunt down a vicious beast, and our villa's specialty dish requires the vicious beast's corpse as the main ingredient. So sorry. Tan Xiu was silent for a while and then slowly said, If I don't need the meat, can you sell me the remaining hairs, claws, scales, bones, blood, and other materials? Tang Dong curiously asked, What do you need these things for? Tan Xiu said calmly, I know how to set up a formation. I need these things to set up a formation. Tang Dong was surprised. You know arrays? That kind of Qimen Dunjia? Tan Xiu nodded and said, I believe you already know what I did in the Everlasting Feast Hall. If I didn't know arrays, how could I break through the 6 layers of the 1,000 Revolution array? Tang Dong patted his forehead and said with a smile, I'm really smart, but I'm muddle-headed this time. I can sell the things you need to you, but business is business. I want to know how much you can offer me. Tan Xiu thought for a moment and then seriously said, I'll buy the remaining hairs, claws, scales, bones, or other things from any fierce beast for 5 million. How about it? 5 million? Tang Dong stared at Tan Xiu with a dumbfounded expression. Never in his dreams did he expect that Tan Xiu would give such a high price. It must be noted that apart from the meat, there weren't many other things that could be used in their villa. Even so, the dishes cooked by each fierce beast could only be sold for about 10 million. As for the remaining parts, they sold them at a very low price. What? You're not satisfied? Tan Xiu asked with a puzzled expression. Tang Dong repeatedly waved his hand and said, "No, no, no. Of course I'm satisfied. The price you gave is reasonable. We'll make the deal. But when do you need it?" "If you have it now, I can buy it now," said Tan Xiao. Tang Dong immediately got up and seriously said, "It just so happens that our villa has some remaining fierce beast parts. I'll take you there to have a look." "All right." Tan Xiao immediately got up. However, when he followed Tang Dong for a dozen steps, he suddenly remembered that he should buy the materials to inscribe talismans. Immediately he said, "I have a presumptuous request. I don't know if I can say it." "Say it," Tang Dong said. "I'm going to buy something. Can you send someone to buy it for me?" Tan Xiao said, "It's not expensive. I believe you should be able to buy it by asking outside." Tang Dong said with a smile, "It's a small matter. Just write the things you want to buy on a piece of paper. I'll immediately send someone to buy it. We'll talk about the money later." "All right." 10 minutes later, Tan Xiao followed Tang Dong to the kitchen in the depths of the villa. Behind the kitchen was a large warehouse. Inside the warehouse was a large freezer with 2 frozen fierce beast carcasses. Outside was an ordinary space where the dissected fierce beast parts were discarded. "There are 4 dissected fierce beasts here that are useless to us. If you're satisfied with them, I can sell them to you according to the price you mentioned." Tang Dong looked at Tan Xiao with some expectation in his heart. After observing for a few minutes, Tan Xiao nodded and said, "I want these things. I can transfer the money to you immediately. But can I ask you a favor?" "Say it." Tang Dong happily said. Tan Xiao said, "I came to Star City, but I have to go to the sea for a few days. I don't have the time nor the energy to send these materials back to Star City. I'll give you an address. Can you send someone to send them to me? I'll arrange someone to receive them after you send them there." Tang Dong said with a smile, "It's a small matter." The 4 fierce beasts materials were worth a total of 20 million yuan. Tan Xiao had recently learned how to transfer money through mobile banking, so he transferred 20 million yuan to Tang Dong. "I want all the materials from the dissected fierce beasts that your villa has hunted within half a year. Write down my cell phone number. Send someone to Star City, and I'll immediately transfer the money to you." After the transaction, Tan Xiao spoke again. Tang Dong stared blankly for a moment and asked with astonishment, "Only half a year?" "Yes," Tan Xiao said. "Only half a year. These fierce beasts that you've hunted are all low-level fierce beasts. They'll be useful to me for half a year. But after that, unless you can hunt more powerful fierce beasts, their materials will no longer be useful to me." Tang Dong suddenly understood and said with a smile, "Don't worry. Since I only have half a year, I'll naturally send more people to the Eye of Death to hunt a lot of fierce beasts." Tan Xiao nodded and said, "If that's the case, then I'll go back to the villa where I dined before. I'll buy the things I need and give the money directly to your people." Tang Dong waved his hand and said, "I already know what the things you want to buy are. Those things won't cost much, so forget about the money." He was not a fool. He had already earned a lot of money from Tan Xiao for the materials from the fierce beasts' corpses. He simply didn't care about that small amount of money. He might as well do Tan Xiao a favor and do a few more transactions with Tan Xiao in the future. "All right." Tan Xiao simply agreed and left straight away. Tang Dong squinted his eyes as he looked at Tan Xiao's back. A strange feeling rose inside his heart. The Tan Xiao he was facing was obviously a young man in his 20s, but his behavior and demeanor were not like a young man at all. Instead, he was like a mature and steady person who once had an extremely distinguished status. This feeling made him feel a bit absurd. When Tan Xiao returned to the villa where he dined before, he found that Xiao Mingjin and Miao Wentong had arrived and were chatting with Dao Master Z. "Mr. Tang! Mr. Tang!" Xiao Mingjin and Miao Wentong got up at the same time. Their tone was a bit cordial. Tan Xiao nodded to the two and said, "You need to wait for a moment. I'll send someone to buy the materials needed to inscribe the talisman. It will be delivered soon. After I finish inscribing the talisman, we can set off." Xiao Mingjin and Miao Wentong looked at each other without saying anything. Dao Master Z faintly smiled and said, "Benefactor Tang, This poor Taoist didn't expect that the two friends you invited turned out to be Benefactor Xiao and Benefactor Miao. This poor Taoist is acquainted with them. But I didn't know that they also came to Jingmen Island. When I was chatting with them, I heard them talking about the Redbud auction. If possible, can we wait until tomorrow to go to the Evil Dragon Sea area? Stalling for time? Tan Xiao frowned. He was a bit unhappy inside. But he didn't show it directly. Instead he asked, "What is the Redbud auction?" Miao Wentong quickly explained. The Redbud auction is an annual large-scale auction in the country. At that time, there will be some auction items that are useful to us cultivators. I've participated in the Redbud auction several times. Although I spent a lot of money, the harvest was quite plentiful. If we miss it this time, I'm afraid we'll have to wait for another year. Items useful to cultivators? Tan Xiao pondered for a moment before he slowly said, "Such being the case, we'll leave tomorrow. When is the time of the Bauhinia auction? Can I go with you to have a look?" Miao Wentong secretly sighed in relief. He was really afraid that Tan Xiao wouldn't agree. Upon hearing Tan Xiao's inquiry, he immediately replied, "2 days ago, my friends in Jingmen Island gave me 4 tickets to the Redbud auction. I originally thought that there will only be me and Brother Xiao, but now with the 2 of you, the tickets are just enough." Tan Xiao said, "That's good. It just so happens that I have some spare money in my hands. I'll go there to see if I can buy some things I need." Miao Wentong and Xiao Mingjin glanced at each other. Both of them secretly smiled wryly inside. They wanted to be friends with Tan Xiao. If Tan Xiao took a fancy to the same thing in the auction, they probably wouldn't be able to compete with Tan Xiao. P.S. After 12 o'clock tonight, this book will officially go on the shelves. At that time, Quiet Night will release 10 chapters. Brothers and sisters, please throw your guaranteed monthly tickets to Quiet Night. I'll be very grateful. In addition, after this book goes on the shelves, the update speed will be accelerated. It will absolutely make the brothers and sisters happy. Finally, I'm asking for a recommendation vote. Chapter 96. In the evening, the pale Tan Xiao followed the Miao Wentong trio to the venue of the Bauhinia auction, Jingmen Island International Business Conference Center. On the 18th floor, in the huge auction venue, there were thousands of tables and chairs. 1/3 of the seats were already occupied. Moreover, some people were rushing in from outside. The 4 of them randomly found a place to sit, and as soon as they sat down, the attendant at the auction site presented them with the list of items to be auctioned. Tan Xiao sat on a chair, looking at the pictures and text introduction of the auction items on the list. The list had 3 pages. When he finished reading the first 2 pages, a bit of disappointment appeared in his eyes. Although many of those items were good, but for him they were simply useless. Opening the last page, Tan Xiao's eyes roughly glanced at the list. However, in an instant his eyes stagnated, revealing a look of disbelief. Space crack stone? It turned out to be a space crack stone. If this picture was taken correctly, then it was definitely the main material to refine an interspatial ring. Space crack stone. Tang Xiao's heartbeat accelerated in that instant, and a look of determination could be seen in his eyes. Originally, he was a bit worried. Tomorrow, he would go to the Evil Dragon Sea area. If he hunted large ominous beasts or several of them, how would he transport them back? But if he could refine an interspatial ring, transporting them back would absolutely not be a problem. Starting price of 5 million? Each bid must not be less than 500,000? Tan Xiao thought for a moment. He felt that with his current funds, it should not be a problem to bid for this fist-sized space crack stone. In the Paradise Club, he won the bet with Yi Taifu. After deducting the 249 million he gave to Jiaorui Dao, he got 250 million. Using it to buy materials from the ominous beasts, he spent 20 million. Now he had a total of 230 million. The base price of the space crack stone is 5 million. I still have 230 million. It should not be a problem to buy it. If it is not enough, I will borrow money from Jiaorui Dao. When I have money, I will return it to him. Tan Xiao secretly thought. Just as Tan Xiao suppressed the surprise in his heart and looked at the list again, he found something useful to him. 1,000-year-old wild ginseng. If it was in the immortal world, not to mention 1,000-year wild ginseng, even a 10,000-year wild ginseng wouldn't be lacking. The 1,000-year-old wild ginseng was what he used to feed his spirit beasts. But now it was too precious to him. If he could buy this 1,000-year-old wild ginseng, he would have one more main ingredient to refine the Golden Bell Elixir. And the Golden Bell Elixir would be extremely effective. Buy! You must get it! Tan Xiu looked at the price below, and was stunned. His eyes were filled with disbelief. 50 million. The base price of this 1,000-year-old ginseng was 50 million. Furthermore, the increment in each bid must not be less than 2 million. Tan Xiu's lips wriggled. If I move all the 1,000-year-old ginseng from my herb garden in the immortal realm, I should be able to buy dozens of earths, right? This price is really a scam. His gaze continued to move downwards, and he discovered that there were a few other items that were useful to cultivators, but not very useful to him. Finally, he locked his eyes on the void crack stone and the 1,000-year-old ginseng. In his heart, he silently calculated how much he would have to pay to get these two things. Mr. Tang, what do you fancy? After Xiaomingzhen finished looking at the list in his hand, he turned to look at Tan Xiu sitting next to him, and asked in a low voice. Tan Xiu pointed to the void crack stone and the 1,000-year-old ginseng and said, I need these two things. Buy them as much as possible. Xiaomingzhen looked at the void crack stone, and was somewhat surprised, because he didn't know what kind of stone it was. The auctioneer only commented, rare or hard material, suspected to be a meteorite from outer space. However, the 1,000-year-old ginseng made him a bit depressed, because he also fancied it. Nowadays on Earth, the 1,000-year-old ginseng was very rare. It had simply reached the point of being priceless. Even if some people wanted to buy it with a lot of money, they didn't even hear of the 1,000-year-old ginseng being sold. Moreover, not to mention 1,000-year-old ginseng, even a 500-year-old wild ginseng was extremely rare and rare nowadays. Forget it. I'll give it up. Xiaomingzhen secretly sighed inside. He turned around and touched Miao Wentong, telling him about the two items that Tan Xiu was prepared to bid on. Miao Wentong also fancied the 1,000-year-old wild ginseng, but just like Xiaomingzhen, he finally decided to give it up after knowing that Tan Xiu wanted it. As for Dao Master Z, he was purely here to be a bystander. Even if he fancied something, he wouldn't bid. It's not that he didn't want to buy it, but he was poor. He was so poor that he simply couldn't afford it. At 8 o'clock in the evening, along with the appearance of a young woman on the auction stage, the originally noisy auction venue suddenly quieted down. Everyone's gazes were focused on the young lady. Welcome to the annual Chinese Redbud Flower Auction. This year's Bauhinia auction will be held on Jingmen Island. All the items on the auction list have been delivered. I am Xiao Ai, the auctioneer of this year's Bauhinia auction. I believe that everyone has already seen the items that will be auctioned in this year's auction list. I also believe that everyone already has the items that they want to auction. I wish everyone in advance that they will be able to harvest a lot and return with a full load. Next, I announce the official start of the 21st Bauhinia auction. The first item that we will auction is a precious antique. It's a blue and white porcelain vase that was produced in the late Ming and early Qing dynasty. Everyone, do not underestimate this blue and white porcelain vase. The seal on it shows that it was used by the imperial family. It is very likely that it was the residence of the founding emperor of the Qing dynasty. Tan Xiu quietly sat below, listening to the auctioneer's bombastic introduction. After announcing the start of the auction, he looked at the hundreds of guests who came to participate in the Bauhinia auction and competed with each other to bid. A strange feeling emerged in his heart. As the saying goes, gold in troubled times, collection in prosperous times. Now he deeply understood the true meaning of this sentence. Items were auctioned at high prices. Items were bought at high prices. He couldn't help but sigh. Nowadays there were many rich people. Moreover, there were even more rich people who loved to collect. Of course, he also had another kind of thought. That is, people are stupid and have a lot of money. It's meaningless to buy a dead object at home. During the 2-hour auction, Tan Xiu didn't bid. On the contrary, Xiaomingzhen and Miao went on each bid once, and bought the items that they needed. Next, we will auction a rare ore. This rare ore is very hard. It is suspected to be a meteorite that fell on Earth from the outer space. I believe that this is a precious, or with a very high collection value. Perhaps its future appreciation space will be difficult to estimate. Its starting price is 5 million, and each bid must be no less than 500,000. Now the bidding begins. The auctioneer held the space-cracked stone and explained it with great emotion. Then he announced the start of the bidding. It's coming. Tan Xiu's spirit was shaken. His eyes were firmly locked on the space-cracked stone. He didn't rush to bid, because after 2 hours of observation, he found out that only a few of the people who bid sincerely wanted to buy it. They were just throwing a brick to attract jade. If someone tried to snatch it from them, they would immediately give up. If no one tried to snatch it from them, they might be able to spend a small amount of money to buy something that they liked. 6 million. A voice rang out, and that person also raised the token in his hand. 6, 5 million. 7 million. 7, 5 million. Soon the price of this space-cracked stone had climbed to 9, 5 million. However, after that person made his bid, no one else made a bid for more than 10 seconds. A sweet smile hung on the auctioneer's face as she said, "That gentleman bid 9, 5 million. Are there any guests who are willing to bid higher? Everyone, please don't underestimate this rare ore. It's mysterious. Perhaps one day in the future, its value will soar by 10 times, or even 20 times compared to now. 10 million. As the auctioneer's voice fell, another voice sounded. Tan Xiu took a deep breath, raised his card and said, 10, 5 million, 15 million. That voice sounded again. Tan Xiu raised his card and shouted, 20 million. Wow! Everyone in the auction venue turned their heads to look at Tang Xiu one after another, and discussions broke out one after another. Who's so rich that he's stupid? A piece of ore of unknown use, even if it's a little rare, shouldn't be worth 20 million. Could it be that he was fooled by the auctioneer and wants to get rich quickly? 20 million for a piece of ore? What kind of joke is this? I think 10 million is high enough. These days, the rich really don't care about money. It's a young man. I wonder which family's prodigal he's from. If I had such a junior, I'd definitely break his legs and make him stay at home to ponder over his mistakes. Could it be that that young man has taken a fancy to the auctioneer? Is he trying to show off in front of her? How interesting. Tan Xiu's hearing was very sharp. He could clearly hear the discussions in the auction, but he still maintained an indifferent expression. He could not be bothered with those who failed to recognize the value of the sky-cracked stone. Of course, he would not tell everyone the use of the sky-cracked stone. After all, the sky-cracked stone was a treasure in his hands, but in the hands of those who did not know how to refine a space ring, it was just a hard stone. The auctioneer looked deeply at Tan Xiu and asked with a smile, "That handsome guy has bid 20 million. Is there anyone who wants to bid higher than 20 million? If there isn't, this precious and rare, or will belong to that handsome guy." There was silence in the auction hall. Just as the auctioneer was about to announce that Tan Xiu had won the bid for the sky-cracked stone, a voice suddenly sounded. 50 million. P.S. I'll be on the shelves after midnight, and then I'll have to face a month-long battle for the monthly votes. I'm feeling a little nervous, so I hope my brothers and sisters can accompany me to fight for the monthly votes. Brothers and sisters, have you prepared your guaranteed monthly votes? Chapter 97. Everyone in the auction venue was shocked by the sudden voice. Even Tan Xiu, who regarded money as dirt, did not expect that in this era, where almost no one could recognize the space-cracking stone, there would be someone willing to buy it at such a high price. Tang Xiu looked toward the source of the voice, and found that the guest who quoted the price was an old man in a black Chinese tunic suit. He had a full head of white hair and a kind countenance, looking like a benevolent old man. However, facing everyone's gaze, he showed a complacent look. Especially when he found that Tan Xiu was looking at him. He raised his chin and gave Tan Xiu a provocative look. This is troublesome. Tan Xiu sighed in his heart and raised his bidding card again. 60 million. While the whole auction venue was boiling, everyone's eyes were wandering between Tan Xiao and the old man. As the saying went, there must be something wrong when something is abnormal. Some quick-witted people were already secretly guessing. Is that rare or really a treasure? However, guessing was just guessing, but no one fought for it. The reason was very simple. Even if that or was precious, they did not know it at all. If it became worthless after they bought it, they would really be the biggest spendthrift. Moreover, the old man who bid for it looked a little ugly, but he did not make another bid. Tan Xiao looked at the old man in the distance with a frozen smile on his face. His face was even uglier than when his father died and his mother got married. He found that the old man's lips moved several times, wanting to make a bid, but he finally stopped. What's going on? Tan Xiao originally wanted to spend a lot, but he did not expect that the other party would stop. The auctioneer's eyes flashed with excitement, and he said in an encouraging tone, "There is a saying that the eyes of the masses are as bright as snow. Let me quote a saying, don't miss a thing when you pass by. If this ore is not a rare treasure, who would auction it at such a high price? I am very lucky and happy to be able to see a powerful person with a keen eye who can identify a treasure. That handsome gentleman bid 60 million. Is there a higher price? If not, this rare treasure will belong to that Mr. Anything else?" As the auctioneer finished his speech, the discussions in the auction hall became silent. Everyone's eyes lingered on Tang Xiao and the old man. They were very curious. Would the old man make another bid? In fact, some of them were already prepared to fight over the old man if he were to make another bid. Just as the auctioneer said, don't miss it. What if? If the ore was really a rare treasure, even if they didn't recognize it now, they could buy it and study it slowly. Maybe they would get a huge surprise. However, to the disappointment of many people, the old man did not make another bid. The auctioneer felt a little regretful, but she was still very excited. She didn't expect this, or to fetch a high price. As an auctioneer, she could get a 10,000th commission for every item sold. Now that this item had been auctioned for 60 million, she had easily gained some unexpected wealth. I hereby announce that this precious ore has been obtained by that gentleman. You can go backstage to do the transaction now, or you can go backstage to do the transaction after the auction ends. Tan Xiao did not hesitate and immediately rushed backstage. The void crack stone was a precious ore that he urgently needed, so he must get his hands on it as soon as possible. Acceptance. Payment. The transaction went smoothly. Soon, Tan Xiao returned to his seat in the auction hall with the void crack stone. A smile hung on the corner of Miao Wentong's mouth. Although his heart was full of confusion, he didn't understand why Tan Xiao wanted to buy that ore. But this was Tan Xiao's privacy, so he didn't ask much. Instead, he smiled and said in a low voice, "Congratulations to Mr. Tang for obtaining a treasure." Tan Xiao nodded. He hesitated for a moment and then said, "Call me something else later. Just call me Tan Xiao. I'll also call you by your name. This all right?" Miao Wentong looked at Tan Xiao's indifferent expression and secretly smiled wryly inside. The auction of the items proceeded very quickly. Tan Xiao also admired the auctioneer's eloquence. Many of the items were originally not worth much, but her witty words stirred many people's emotions and made them generously bid, causing the price of the items to rise steadily. Talent. This word suddenly emerged in Tan Xiao's mind. In the early hours of the morning, the auction was about to come to an end. It was also the last highlight of this auction. The next item is the penultimate item of this auction. It's also the treasure that countless people are paying attention to, the Millennium Ginseng. As we all know, with the rapid development of science and technology, it's very difficult to obtain a real wild ginseng in this era, where forests and mountains are heavily exploited. And a Millennium Ginseng is even rarer than a phoenix feather and a unicorn horn. Who can get such a treasure tonight? I hereby announce that the auction begins. The auctioneer, Xiao Ai, stepped back a step after she finished speaking, indicating that she would hand over the auction stage to the guests below. 60 million. 70 million. 75 million. 80 million. Tan Xiao didn't rush to participate. He was waiting for the final competition. However, the price kept rising. In just 2 minutes, it had risen to 180 million. This price was not something that he could buy with his current funds. I'm still short of 10 million, but I'm afraid it will be far more than this amount. Do I really need to borrow money from Jiaorui Dao? Jiaorui Dao will get 250 million, plus his capital. It should be more than 300 million, but he still owes a lot of debt. After paying off the debt, I'm afraid there won't be much left. Tan Xiu's mind was racing. He was hesitating whether he should borrow money from Jiaorui Dao or not. Moreover, it was easy to borrow money, but would it be difficult to pay it back? After all, it was a capital of hundreds of millions. Even if he could invite Kong Xia to work for him, even if he wanted to set up a company to make money, how long would it take to earn hundreds of millions? How long would it take to pay off Jiaorui Dao's debt? Half a minute later, Tan Xiu made a decision in his mind: borrow it. He believed in his own ability, and he didn't want to miss this Millennium Ginseng. Tan Xiu left his seat and went to the last corner of the auction hall to make a phone call. As a result, he learned that Jiaorui Dao had paid off his debt of 220 million, leaving him with 80 million. Tan Xiu didn't hesitate and directly borrowed the 80 million. Ding! A few minutes later, he received a text message on his phone. 80 million had been transferred to his bank account. 218 million. Is there any higher bidder? If not, this Millennium Ginseng will belong to that gentleman. The auctioneer looked excited as he loudly asked. Tan Xiu looked at the silent guests around him. He slowly raised the paddle in his hand and said, 220 million. The auctioneer, Xiao Ai's eyes lit up as she said with a smile, sure enough, heroes come from the youth. This handsome gentleman has bid 220 million, which is really a big move. Today's scene reminds me of a saying, heroes come from the youth, and the older ginger is no longer the spicier. I don't think anyone can bid higher than this handsome gentleman, right? If not, this Millennium Ginseng will belong to this handsome gentleman. Many people in the auction hall revealed an angry look. They recognized the saying, heroes come from the youth. But the saying, the older ginger is no longer the spicier, made many people angry. In the front row, a fat middle-aged man, who was snuggling up to a young girl, pulled the gold chain around his neck. He raised the Vacheron Constantine watch on his wrist, which was worth millions, and said with a gruff voice, 230 million. 250 million. A cold light burst out from Tan Xiu's eyes as he shouted in a deep voice. The fat middle-aged man pushed away the young boy next to him, turned his head and stared fiercely at Tan Xiu. He then raised his middle finger and shouted, 300 million. Wow! Everyone in the auction hall was shocked by the fat middle-aged man's bid. 300 million. A Millennium Ginseng was auctioned at a sky-high price of 300 million? Everyone began to whisper to each other. What's the background of this stupid fatty? How could he take out 300 million to bid for a Millennium Ginseng? I definitely think that the food he ate only grew meat, not brains. The price of a Millennium Ginseng is at most 150 million. Any more than that and he's a fool. Stupid. Even if this Millennium Ginseng is precious, it's not worth 300 million, right? He's obviously competing with that young man. Idiot. There are idiots every year, but this year there are especially many. That damn fatty has money to burn, right? Stupid people with lots of money. Tan Xiu squinted his eyes as he looked at the provocative eyes of the fat middle-aged man. He secretly sighed inside. He couldn't afford it. He could only bid 250 million. Any more and he couldn't afford it. If it's in your life, you'll get it. If it's not in your life, don't force it. This sentence emerged in Tan Xiu's mind as he finally smiled bitterly. He used to be very rich. As long as he fancied something, there was almost nothing he couldn't buy. Therefore, he was very clear about the power of money. But now, he had to start all over again, and was seriously short of funds. In the end, the Millennium Ginseng was obtained by the fat middle-aged man. The show is about to start. Miao Wentong, who was sitting next to Tan Xiu, was a bit excited as he whispered. Tan Xiu was surprised. The Millennium Ginseng is the most expensive item on the auction list. It should be the last one, right? Is there anything else that's not on the list? Miao Wentong whispered, Mr. Tang. Tan Xiao, you haven't participated in the Bauhinia auction before, so you don't know its rules. In every auction, there will be an item that's not on the list as the finale. I see. Tan Xiao was suddenly enlightened. He had some expectations for this last item. He didn't get the Millennium Ginseng. He didn't spend the money in his hand. Maybe the last item was what he needed. Suddenly, the lights in the auction venue were all turned off. Then, a beam of dim white light shone on the auctioneer from the top. Finally, on the wall behind the auctioneer, the projector projected an image. Chapter 98. In the gloomy auction venue, pairs of eyes were glued to the projector screen. It was a video. In the vast sea with turbulent waves, the islands were scattered like stars in the sky, like inlaid gems. A soaring eagle swooped down toward an isolated island. The isolated island was very large, tens of square kilometers in area. Undulating mountains, lush trees, beautiful birdsong, fragrant flowers, and colorful butterflies frolicking on the peaks. At the highest peak in the center of the island was a majestic castle full of European style. The flat road branched into 3 roads at the top of the mountain. One led to the castle, one led to the nearby parking lot, and the last one led to the helipad. Looking at the isolated island from above, one would be surprised to find that there were 9 hills extending thousands of meters into the sea. At the end of each hill was a European-style pavilion. Following the mountain path down to the sea, there was a private pier where passenger ships were anchored. 9 dragons spitting pearl? How is this possible? Tan Xiao's pupils shrunk, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. His body slightly trembled at this moment, and his heart was like a raging storm. He once had an excellent feng shui treasure land when he was in the immortal world. The heaven and earth spiritual qi there was rich, and the spiritual energy in the earth vein was abundant. Cultivating there would definitely yield twice the results with half the effort. And that place was called the 9 Dragons Spitting Pearl Secret Domain. The video ended. The lights in the auction venue were turned on again. The auctioneer smiled and said, This video is the last item for today's auction. It's 9 Dragons Island in the Pacific Ocean, and its neighboring island is South Bird Island. The distance between the two is 2,000 nautical miles. This private island was originally owned by the owner of a European consortium. But unfortunately, the island has just been developed for 2.5 years, and the owner of the consortium had to sell it due to special reasons. It just so happens that the big boss of our auction has a good relationship with the owner of the island, so he entrusted the auction to us. The guests who are qualified to participate in the Bauhinia auction are the real tycoons in the country. I'm sure many people will be interested in this feng shui treasure land, so I won't waste any more time. The auction of this private island will now begin. Its base price is 500 million, and each increment must be no less than 10 million. The bidding begins now. As the auctioneer's voice fell, the hundreds of people participating in the auction below started whispering. After all, this was a transaction worth at least 500 million. Although they were all very rich, 500 million was not a small amount to them. This island is not bad. Miao Wentong had a smile on his face, but he had no intention of bidding. He glanced at Tan Xiao, and then turned his head to another direction. He looked at Xiaomingzhen and asked with a smile, If I remember correctly, you're planning to buy a house abroad. How is it? Are you interested? Xiaomingzhen was silent for a moment. He slowly shook his head and said, The base price of this private island is indeed not high. If he could get it for 500 million, he would be able to make some money even if he sold it after buying it. But everyone knows this problem. So, I think even 1 billion won't necessarily be enough to buy it. I'm not a tycoon, so I can't compare to you. So I'll start being a bystander. Miao Wentong couldn't help laughing and said, If you really want to buy it, I can lend it to you. I can't take out more than that, but 1 billion is still within my means. Xiaomingzhen said with a smile, I'll take a look first. Tan Xiao stood up and walked to the back corner of the auction venue. He then dialed a cell number. Star City. Chen Zhizhong, who had just bought a villa in Southgate Town, was sitting cross-legged in the study room, as he earnestly practiced the cultivation technique taught to him by Tang Xiu. He used to be a cultivator, but what he cultivated was true qi, which was very different from immortal cultivation techniques. However, there were thousands of great Daos, but all roads lead to the same destination. Because of his previous foundation, he was working hard to transform his true qi into true essence. Ring, ring, ring. His cell phone suddenly rang, causing Chen Zhizhong to wake up from his cultivation. Suddenly, an angry expression appeared on his face. He grabbed the cell phone and looked at the caller ID. The angry expression on his face instantly disappeared without a trace, and was replaced with a bit of respect as he pressed the answer button. Master, are you looking for me? I need money. The more the better. How much money can you transfer in 10 minutes? Chen Zhizhong was silent for half a minute. His mind was constantly thinking. After half a minute he said, about 3 billion. Time is too tight. If you can give me half a day, I can get 5 billion or even more. Tan Xiu said, I'll give you my account number. 10 minutes later, transfer 3 billion to my account. All right. Chen Zhizhong complied. He no longer cared about his cultivation and began to make calls. Jingmen Island auction venue. Xiao Mingjin and Miao Wentong were chatting together. Suddenly, they noticed that Tan Xiu had left his seat and immediately looked at each other in dismay. Tan Xiu had just left his seat to make a phone call. After he came back, he began to participate in the auction of the Millennium Ginseng. Brother Miao, could it be that Tan Xiu wants to participate in the auction? Does he fancy that private island? Xiao Mingjin's eyes flashed with a surprised expression as he asked in a low voice. Miao Wentong said in a low voice, It's very likely. Look at his serious expression. I feel that this matter is most likely true. However, I really don't understand why he would run to the Pacific Ocean to buy a private island at such a young age. Could it be that he wants to move to that island and live a secluded life? Xiao Mingjin said with a forced smile. I can't see through him. I really can't see through him. To be honest, Tan Xiu's age and appearance give me a strong contradictory feeling. I simply can't figure out how such a young man's words and actions don't have the slightest bit of a young man's attitude. On the contrary, he looks like a wise man with deep schemes. He's an evildoer, Miao Wentong said with certainty. Tan Xiu returned to his seat and quietly waited for the money to be transferred to his account. Although he could see the strange expression on Miao Wentong's and Xiao Mingjin's faces, he didn't explain. If the Millennium Ginseng was something he really wanted, then this private island was something he must get. Even if he had to snatch it, he must get his hands on it. 510 million. The nouveau riche fat middle-aged man was the first to bid. 520 million. 550 million. In the last round of the auction, the number of people participating in the auction was relatively less compared to the previous rounds. But there were still more than a dozen people who were constantly increasing the price. Among them, the one who bid the most jubilant was the fat middle-aged man wearing the golden chain. After 7 or 8 minutes, the price had climbed to 1.48 billion. 1.5 billion. A trace of sweat appeared on the fat middle-aged man's forehead as he still shouted, 2 billion. Another old man, who was over 70 years old, raised the card in his hand and shouted. The fat middle-aged man suddenly turned his head. His eyes were brimming with anger as he stared at the old man. After gasping for a few times, he shouted again, 1 billion. At this price, only the old man and the fat middle-aged man were still bidding. The old man was expressionless, as if he turned a blind eye to the anger on the fat middle-aged man's face. He once again bid, 2 billion. 3 billion. The fat middle-aged man's voice was somewhat hoarse, but he still persisted. However, what made him turn angry was that the old man silently shook his head and no longer bid. Phew! The fat middle-aged man wiped the sweat on his forehead and secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He had actually reached his limit and would have to give up if he increased the price again. A smile appeared on the corner of the auctioneer's mouth. His eyes flickered as he smilingly said, The price of 9 Dragons Island has now climbed to 2.3 billion. It's indeed a terrifying number. But I think there should be some people who haven't bid yet. After all, a private island of tens of square kilometers has been developed and constructed. If it's properly utilized, it will definitely be a paradise on Earth, a kingdom of its own. There are no laws in the real world on Nine Dragons Island. Whoever owns the entire island will be the king of this land, the one with the most power. If the owner of Nine Dragons Island is willing, he can apply internationally to establish a new country. This place is a dream, a paradise. I want to ask, is there anyone else who wants to increase the price? Is there anyone else who wants to become the owner of Nine Dragons Island? The entire auction venue fell into a dead silence. Everyone was watching each other. They were incited by the auctioneer's words, and their emotions had been completely stirred. Yet they couldn't come up with so much liquid capital. Otherwise, it would have a very serious impact on their career. And it would be a huge blow to their foundation. They were tempted, but they were helpless. This was the truest portrayal of their hearts. A trace of disappointment was revealed on the auctioneer's beautiful face. Although the price of 2.3 billion had exceeded her expectation, she still hoped that this island could be sold at a higher price. On the contrary, the fat middle-aged man was the exact opposite. A smile appeared on his face, and he even looked a bit proud. His eyes swept over the last old man who bid against him, and then subconsciously glanced at Tan Xiao. 2.5 billion. Tan Xiao's voice echoed in the auction venue. In an instant, everyone in the entire auction venue revealed a strange expression. No one thought that Tan Xiao, who couldn't even buy a millennium ginseng, would unexpectedly bid for this private island. Moreover, he even bid a sky-high price. Did he have that much money? Where did he get such courage from? And who was he? Questions surged in everyone's heart. Miao Wentong, Xiao Mingzhen, and even the sage-like Dao Master Zi, who was sitting next to Tan Xiao, were shocked by Tan Xiao's big move. They looked at Tan Xiao with disbelief. They didn't expect that Tan Xiao would actually be able to come up with so much money. Xiao Mingzhen gently touched Miao Wentong and said in a low voice, "You advise him not to mess around here. The big boss behind this auction is very powerful. We absolutely can't afford to provoke him." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.